This happened about 2 years into our now almost 9-year relationship, and it still gives me chills when I think about it. My partner Ron and I had just pulled up to his mom's house after a date night, and we were in the middle of saying our goodbyes. His mom's house used to be in a quiet, residential area surrounded by busy main streets and a random freeway entrance 2 blocks over. We were not parked more than 5 minutes when a man coming from the house next door came up to the car with a flashlight, tapping on the passenger window, motioning for us to lower it. Needless to say, we were both a little freaked out as he appeared out of nowhere and refused to lower the window, especially considering we did not recognize him. He tapped harder this time, and Ron told me to just drive around the block until he went away. So I drove down to the end of the street to put some distance between us and the man. That's when we see him jump into a car and drive full speed towards us. Panicked, I make a wide right turn onto the main street so that I am in the left lane. The dude does the same, except pulled into the lane on our left in the middle of oncoming traffic. At this point, I am hysterical, and Ron and I are trying to rationalize what is happening. When I catch a glimpse of his face, he seemed so angry, and I realize he's screaming something at us, but I can't make it out. So I make a jerk maneuver in front of the car to my right to dart down to the next residential street. We thought we had lost him, but he came flying down behind us only to pull up on our left again, screaming at us to get out of the car. While this is happening, Ron has the police on the phone trying to give them details about the car and the man driving. I, on the other hand, step hard on the brake and reversed it all the way back down the block to get away from the man. He must not have seen it coming because he seemed to stall for a minute. We were hoping that was the end of it, but he chased us down that street too. I realize the freeway entrance is only a block over now, so I hightail it, running a red light in the process, and pull onto the freeway at the last minute. In the rearview mirror, we see him stop abruptly and stare at us while we zoomed down the freeway. With the police on the phone, they explain that they'll send out a patrol to scope out the area for a car of that description. Not sure if that ever happened. I drive until I was sure he wasn't following us and we were far enough away from Ron's mom's house to call my parents. We pulled into a Rite Aid parking lot and waited for them to come get us while I am just crying hysterically. That night, my stepdad drove Ron back to his mom's house where they saw no sign of the man. The next day, when Ron had told his family what happened, they went next door to confront the neighbor about it, only for the neighbor to explain that they had no company over that night, did not recognize the car, and did not know anyone of that description. So, this happened to me and my best friend when we were in high school. We live in the lovely state of Hawaii, and we would often go to the beach a short walk from my house when she would stay over. To give a brief description of us, we are both fairly skinned females, blondish, brown hair, and have light-colored eyes. We both look pretty similar except she has corkscrew curls. People would ask us if we were sisters while we were growing up. This is slightly important for later on in the story. A good portion of where I grew up was good old Iwa Beach, deep into Iwa, like Hua Bush. If anyone knows where that is or has heard of it, you know where I'm talking about. For the rest, it's an area where homeless, druggies tend to hang out, and the beach is actually quite rocky. If you head up the beach though, there's less rocks and less people. That nicer area of the beach is the part that's closer to my house, and where we usually would go. Kind of like a secret beach location, but not really if you lived in that particular area. So one weekend, my friend, let's name her Jessica, and I were hanging out at my house. We decided to go hang out at the beach and tan, do whatever. This particular day though, we had decided that instead of walking to the slightly less rocky beach, we would go to the secret beach near White Plains. No rocks, not too many people, nicer waves, more beach. It was about a 10 to 15 minute drive, and we thought, what the hell, why not? We get to the beach, there's not a lot of people, it's a lovely day, and we put our stuff down and just start chilling. Then, it happens. Jessica and I had been there maybe all of 20 minutes, when we were approached by a man that was maybe about 30 to 40 years older, average build, dark hair, and a bit of facial hair if I remember correctly. There was nothing about him at first to give us any creepy vibes. We could tell he was local, and it's uncommon for strangers to come up to each other at the beach and talk story or ask something. So we thought nothing of it when the man introduced himself as Dave. However, after his polite intro, he then proceeded to tell us that he was a journalist/reporter for a well-known local newspaper, and he was doing an article about tourists and their thoughts on less-known beaches. Jessica and I immediately gave each other that side look like, something isn't right here. That sentence alone made us suspicious for a couple reasons. One, he had no camera, notebook, pen, or anything to indicate he was taking notes for his story. He was also just wearing swim trunks, not really professional appearance. Two, there was a report on the news around that time that young girls were being conned into modeling agencies and being approached by men on beaches, or the mall, anywhere where tourists or locals were known to frequent, and being kidnapped into human trafficking. 3. He had not given us any proof that he in fact worked at said newspaper, or that his name really was Dave, like a business card. Because of this, we decided we weren't going to trust anything this guy said. I would also like to note that while we were in a secret spot, it wasn't a spot that a lot of tourists really know about or even go to. They like to go to the beaches near their hotels or the ones they have read about or heard about, and wouldn't drive all the way there. Really, it's where locals hang out. This is kind of where our descriptions come into play, because I was born and raised there, even if I didn't look like it, and so was Jessica. It would be pretty easy to mistake us for dumb tourists. Anyway, so Dave says he's writing this story, right? He then asks us what our names are, and starting to look at Jessica and I up and down, almost like he's memorizing what we look like and sizing us up. Never in my life have I ever gotten such major stranger danger vibes from a guy, and proceed to give him some fake name off the top of my head. Jessica follows suit. This is where it starts to get even creepier and uncomfortable. After a brief pause and more intense staring, Dave proceeds to say, "Well, are you girls hungry? I got food in my barbecue at my van if you wanted to hang out." Yes, this dude said van, and points to his green-colored kidnapper van. Instantly, the red flags are flapping in the hurricane-like winds of our instincts. Why in the world would two 15, 16-year-old girls want to hang out with a middle-aged man? It was almost like the teen version of asking you if you wanted candy. You just had to hop into the van. Dave wasn't even asking us questions about the beach and how we had heard about it. In fact, it was like he completely forgot the reason why he was there and just really wanted us to go to his van with him. We told him we were okay and thanks for the offer, hoping he would leave us alone. Dave wasn't going to take no for an answer. He kind of got a look on his face like he was surprised that we had turned him down, and then got more forceful. "Are you sure? I got chicken and some drinks. It'll be fun," he said, hoping that we would cave if he kept being persistent. Again, we told him no, and he decided to leave us alone for now, only to walk to his van, sit and watch us lying on the beach. It was really unsettling to have him stare at us like that, like he was waiting to see what we would do. More so because we were two young girls in bikinis by ourselves in a somewhat closed-off beach. There was a group of guys that wasn't too far from us, military guys, pretty easy to tell, and Jessica and I decided to go and talk to them. Plus, we felt a little safer knowing that we weren't alone on the beach with this guy. So we walked up to the group and asked them if Dave had come over to them and had asked them any questions regarding his story. The guys looked at us, then looked at Dave, and said that he hadn't approached them at all, and that they had been on the beach for a while before us. Jessica and I took this as a sign that it was time to pack up and go home. Dave was still watching us. He had seen our interaction with the guys, as we came back and gathered up our things and walked off towards my truck. We didn't immediately walk straight to my truck, and we kind of walked past it to see if Dave had packed up his stuff to start following us. I was parked along the road and had the trees blocking the beach on one side. So if anyone decided they wanted to snatch you up off the road, you couldn't see it from the beach. Luckily, we didn't see him, and we left. Checking my rearview mirror in case I saw that suspicious van follow us on the way back to my house. On the way back, Jessica had asked me if I had gotten that gut feeling the same time he had said he was working for the newspaper. I said I did, and we both told each other the same exact things that made us feel that way. It was almost like we had read each other's minds and was seeing the exact same thing. Really eerie. I think what made the experience all the more unnerving was that he seemed to be looking for specific targets. He hadn't asked the guys anything, so he was definitely looking for girls. Who knows? Maybe he could have been a human trafficker and was trying to get either one or both of us into that van. I have never been back to that particular area of White Plains since. I almost wonder what would have happened if that group of guys wasn't there, or if we hadn't listened to our gut. I have always been good friends with one of my cousins, Cole, who's the same age as I am. The two of us were not quite inseparable, but we always did get along very well together, and were often found together, both in school and outside of it. When we were 12 and in the 6th grade, I was hanging out with Cole on a Friday afternoon around the later part of May, and we were psyched at the start of the weekend. We had wound up at his house since we didn't live too far from me, and at one point my mom called to say that our grandpa was in the hospital. While the issue with our grandpa wasn't expected to be life-threatening, he was being kept at the hospital overnight for observation, and both my parents and Cole's were planning on staying with him and Grandma at the hospital. I was told that I was given the okay to stay at Cole's house for the night, with Cole's 15-year-old brother Hunter being in charge while our parents were out. This was fine by us. I got along well enough with Hunter, and he was never the bossy older brother/cousin that some of my other friends said they had to put up with. We ordered out for pizza and enjoyed goofing off as boys that age tend to do. At around 9 or so, there was a knock at the front door, and Cole went to answer it. I was a bit curious as to who it could be at that time of the night, and so I watched from a ways back. At the door were two older guys. They said that they were with the city and that they were investigating reports about the water pressure supposedly being bad in the neighborhood. They asked Cole if his parents were home, and when Cole said they were unavailable at that moment, the guys started asking a bunch of questions about how the water pressure was in the house and if they could come inside to check. Hunter came over at that point and politely told the guys that the water pressure was fine and perhaps they should just move on to check on other homes in the neighborhood. The guys seemed reluctant to leave, but turned and walked away after Hunter started closing the door. After the door was shut, we looked at each other and shrugged, but didn't think too much of it after that, and went back to goofing off. Eventually, we decided to go to bed. Cole and Hunter shared a bedroom, and we all agreed that I would sleep in there with them, rather than me hitting the sack on a couch or something like that, so that we could talk while we fell asleep, and Hunter grabbed a sleeping bag out of their camping supplies for me. When we got into their bedroom, they stripped down to their briefs, and I remembered Cole had mentioned to me once a while back that they had started sleeping in just their underwear. Since I hadn't originally planned on staying the night, I hadn't brought anything with me from home as far as overnight stuff. But since I wasn't in the mood to sleep in my clothes, I stripped down to my briefs as well, though I felt a bit embarrassed, even though we were all guys there, and I knew they wouldn't say anything or be judgmental. They climbed into their beds and I quickly crawled into the sleeping bag, and after talking for a while about random stuff, we eventually fell asleep. Early the next morning, I got up because I had to pee, and so I quietly got out of the sleeping bag and went and did my business in the bathroom. On the way back to the bedroom, I heard something in the family room, which was on the opposite end of the house from the bedrooms and the particular bathroom I was using. I didn't pay too much attention to it at the time, thinking it must be either Cole or Hunter, until I got back into the bedroom and realized that both of them were still in there. Trying not to panic, I woke them and told them that I thought someone was in the house. They quietly followed me, and the moment we walked into the family room, We saw the two guys from the night before in there, and it was rather clear they were robbing the place. One of them started moving towards us as he pulled out a wicked-looking knife. The three of us promptly raced to the front door, somehow managed to get it unlocked and open, and we fled outside. As luck would have it, a cop was driving by at that particular moment. We quickly flagged him down and told him about the two guys in the house. The cop called for backup, and within a couple of minutes, several other cops were there, and they proceeded to enter the house. And after some searching, they caught the two guys. The cops figured out that the two guys must have entered from a window in the laundry room that had a broken latch, and had probably targeted that house because, while it wasn't empty, they had probably realized that there were no adults there, and figured that if we discovered them, we could be more easily dealt with than adults. To add insult to injury, while we were waiting outside while the cops searched the house, some of the neighbors came out to see what the commotion was about, and this included some kids who went to the same school as Cole and me, including a few who were in the 6th grade class with us. It was during that time that the three of us realized that we had never had the chance to get dressed, so, just like in the stereotypical nightmare, we had to stand outside in full view of everyone in just our briefs for what seemed like forever before being allowed back inside. When we went back to school on Monday, Cole and I had to put up with more than a bit of snickering, stares, and ribbing for the next few weeks until school ended for the summer. In April of last year, my boyfriend and I were coming home from our friend's house. I had just finished my first year at college, and we wanted to go out and celebrate and have some fun. We live in a rural town, and our friend lived on the far side of it, so our walk was about a half hour or so. I had a drink or two, and smoked some of the joint they had rolled. Smoking makes me paranoid, and this night was no different. Anyway, we left at maybe 10 or 11 p.m., and everything was perfectly normal until we got to the end of the long street that would eventually lead to my house. This street always feels so long to walk, like hours can pass, and you barely make a dent in the amount of steps made. The street we turned onto this road was maybe 10 blocks from my house. A few minutes after we turned onto this road, I felt like something was off, but my boyfriend said that I was stoned, and reminded me that I'm a pretty paranoid person to begin with. I really am. This white pickup truck that was parked in front of some house turns on and begins to drive slowly away, and would then park. I watched it to see if it was just me being paranoid or not, but it proceeded to stop a couple of houses down and sat there with the car still on. As soon as we would get close, it would drive away, parking a little further away. This continued until we got to the end of my street. At this point, I kept telling my boyfriend that I am not paranoid, that this truck was following us, and he had gone quiet. A couple houses down from mine, this truck drives to the end of the street, my house on the corner. There's a dead end right by my house because we live near a river. The truck stops for a moment at the dead end and proceeds to turn on their high beams and begin to slowly drive towards us. My boyfriend sticks his arm out in front of me, stopping me from walking any further as this truck continues to approach. My house is so close, yet so far. This truck slowly drives by us. The windows are tinted, but we can see two silhouettes. And because they had blinded us, we didn't think to look at the license plates or even the model of the truck. I swear, I felt like that was the night I was going to die. My thoughts hurled around in my mind, and I could see that my boyfriend was in the same mindset. My boyfriend, being pretty quick on his feet, waited until the truck disappeared from sight and took my hand before racing to my house and locking the door. He had thought about turning down one of the other streets so that we could try to lose them, but he figured he would wait until they were out of sight to book it to my house so they wouldn't see which house we went in. We looked out one of the front windows very carefully and saw this truck come back into view and began to drive around the block, presumably looking for us. This went on for 10 minutes. I called the police to inform them that we had been followed, but without the license plates or model, they could only keep their eyes open for suspicious white trucks. I was adamant that these people had to know one of us, if not me, because they drove until they were beside my house. Whether they actually knew it was my house or not, I don't know. My boyfriend tries to insist that it was probably a bunch of kids trying to mess with us, but I don't believe that. A few days later, we heard that someone was picked up and was last seen in a white truck. Since this night, there have been stories in the paper and online that people have been grabbing people, and these people were trafficked in the area. I am still seeing reports even today, which prompted this unsettling memory. It makes me wonder if they were some of these people, and if they were they after both of us, or just one of us? Or were they truly just a bunch of jerks trying to mess with us? Either way, I don't care to know. Whenever I see a white truck, I become on edge. It may be silly, but the events of that night are still fresh in my mind, years later. For clarification, I am a male, and this happened in my early 20s. Before I start, I need to provide a little backstory. I grew up in a very sheltered life, usually only leaving the house for grocery runs and doctor appointments. I didn't even go to school. My mother decided it was best to homeschool me. I was, and still am, very socially awkward as a result of my upbringing, though I am getting better. One thing I did leave the house for as a child was to compete in talent competitions. I was a pianist and still am, though a little rusty. I had a newspaper article published for me once to advertise a fundraising concert I was holding at my local church. I needed funds to go to a competition 1,500 miles away. In the article, the journalist recorded a quote from me. She had asked what I thought of my talent, and being a child in a Christian house, I replied, "It's not my talent. God let me borrow it." Fast forward till I became an adult. I was eager to leave the house and to get out on my own. I decided to get my commercial driver's license so I could get out and see as much of the world as I could. Besides driving long hours and the occasional night of having trouble finding a halfway decent place to park at the end of the day, I enjoyed it. One night, I was pulling into a truck stop to park for the night. As I was taking my dog out to do his business, I passed by the truck next to mine. It had its driver's side window down, and the driver was sitting in the driver's seat. He called out to me as I passed him, complimenting that he liked my dog, and asked if he was friendly. I thanked him and informed him that my dog was shy for strangers. Being that I sat in a truck all day with no human interaction, besides the occasional honk and guy flipping me off for being slow, I longed for conversation and told him I would be right back. A few minutes later, after putting my dog in my truck, I walked over to talk to my parking spot neighbor. We chatted for a while, him in his chair, and I standing on the top step on the side of his truck. After about 20 minutes, he asked me if I noticed that his arm had bumped mine 7 times. My arm was on top of his armrest as I clung to the side of his truck. This surprised me. I had not noticed it at all. Thinking back on it, I believe he was testing to see how situationally aware I was. I told him I had not noticed. It was cold outside, considering it was the middle of winter, so he invited me to sit in his truck to continue our conversation. This is where I should have had alarm bells ringing in my head, but growing up so sheltered, I was too trusting of people. I entered his truck. We continued to talk, though the conversation started crossing lines, asking questions that were too personal. He was asking me stuff like, "What's your phone number? Who are your parents? What was your grandparents' full names? Where do you live?" etc. Regretfully, I answered him. Thankfully, I had the sense to at least not give him my address. We had also swapped seats during the conversation. First, he had moved to the passenger seat, so I could sit in the driver's seat. But then, we swapped to where I was in the passenger seat, and he was in the driver's seat. The conversation started to take a weird and creepy turn. After all those questions, he asked, "Did you notice that my eyes don't have any color?" His irises were black, just two black orbs surrounded by the white of his eyes. I later looked this up on Google. There is apparently a rare condition that causes someone's eyes to be so dark brown that they appear black. This is where I started to feel very uneasy. He started talking about my childhood, and this is where he said something that disturbed me the most. He asked, "Didn't you have a talent as a kid?" I said yes, and that I played the piano. He replied, "Wouldn't that be a lie since you only borrowed it?" I had not mentioned to him anything about that article, and the city it was from was too small to be noticed by someone that lived so far away. He lived like 2,000 miles away from my hometown. I was ready to get out of there. I was trying to think of how to excuse myself without rousing suspicion. He started trying to convince me to ride with him to his next delivery and to just leave my truck where it was, that he would bring me back the next day. I declined. He then asked if I would come visit him at his home. Again, I declined. It had been several hours, so I decided to tell him that I needed to take my dog out to do his business again, so he didn't go in my truck. I exited his truck and took my dog out again, but this time when my dog was done, I went back in my truck and locked the doors. I also tilted both seats forward, so it would be difficult for him if he entered my truck, buying me time if needed. The next morning, he was gone. I continued on my day, relieved that I was away from him. A few hours later, he called me. "So why did you tilt your seats forward last night?" I told him it was to keep my dog from jumping on them. He continued to talk to me, though I kept my answers short this time. I blocked his number after he hung up, and later decided to change my phone number. I know I was lucky that it didn't go farther than a creepy conversation. I am more careful now about who I talk to and where I am. Be careful, everyone. Never get into a stranger's vehicle, no matter how friendly and innocent they seem. I have learned my lesson. When I was in my early 20s and living in Chicago, I wasn't making much money. When I found this apartment, it was too good to be true. The top floor of a duplex with 6 rooms for $775 a month. The agent who showed me the apartment stressed to me that the landlords were very religious. I didn't have a problem with that, even if it did sound a little ominous. The landlords were an elderly couple that lived downstairs. They seemed okay at first. When I saw them in the yard, they would smile at me. They took good care of the house. When they saw I was having my boyfriend over, things started to get really weird. One day I was in my office writing. I hear a knock at the door. I open it, and it's the old lady from downstairs. Before I can say hello, she says, "Have you ever gotten an abortion?" I shut the door in her face. No thanks. This was a colossal mistake. The house was laid out kind of weird. There was a door at the bottom of a flight of stairs that I thought led to a communal laundry room. But after accidentally opening it once, I discovered it led directly into my landlord's living room. I, unfortunately, learned this the hard way. I was in my kitchen cooking. My boyfriend was at work, and I was by myself when I heard what sounded like the click of a door. "Okay," I said out loud. "What the hell was that?" I didn't really make the connection that it could have been the door that led into their living room. I walk into the hallway and look around. I don't see anyone at the end of the hallway. I poke my head into all the rooms. Nobody there. Then I look down the staircase leading to their house, and the neighbor lady is standing there, staring me down. I screamed. She flinched and stepped back into her apartment and swung the door shut. After that, every time I left the house, I would come back and something would have been moved. A window would be shut. Once, the shower was dripping and my towel was damp. I couldn't lock the door since it was technically a door to their house. They were the only ones with the key. The knocking got so frequent, 3 or 4 times a day, that me and my boyfriend propped up an old mattress so we wouldn't have to hear it while we slept. The second to last straw was when I opened the door for work, and the stairs were gone. I physically could not leave my house because there were no stairs. They had been dismantled and were sitting on their porch. I called them repeatedly, but they didn't answer. Finally, their son came out of the house and explained that they were remodeling their porch. He told me I had to cut through their apartment downstairs. I descended the stairs and opened the door, and they were both sitting at their filthy kitchen table, staring at me. The phone was in its cradle. They must have heard it ringing. They kept staring at me with this blank look on their faces. I crossed their kitchen and left out their back door. A few days later, I came home from my job and noticed the bathroom floor was almost completely flooded, like somebody left a faucet on or the shower on. The old woman, seeing that I had come home, came upstairs and knocked, screaming at me that I had flooded the bathroom and that her son had to come fix it. I was so run down at this point that I just told her it was okay. Her son came by a few hours later. He was completely drunk. I open the door and tell him that I need an hour or so before he comes, and he picks something up and swings it at me. It was a massive wrench. I somehow duck out of the way, and he stumbles over. I book it down the newly repaired stairs as quickly as possible and call the police. They come by and take down a complaint, but claim since there was no physical contact, they can't do anything, which seemed odd to me. I learned later that the old couple has a daughter on the force. In the middle of the night, me, my boyfriend, and several of his friends packed all of our stuff into a Chevy Astro. We lived in hotels and the van for a month until we found another house. They never attempted to contact us again. Several years ago, I was maybe 19 or 20. We lived in the state's capital. Some family friends were coming to visit us during that summer, and my mom wanted to cook a particular dish for them. This dish is best served the next day, as the flavors have time to develop. However, we needed chorizo sausage to make the dish, something my mom forgot about until 7 p.m. that night. As this was in the Midwest, chorizo was hard to come by, so a quick Google search revealed a small butcher shop close to our state capitol building. Mom called and they said they had chorizo. Dad volunteered to go get it, and I agreed to go along because I was bored. We got into our nice Cadillac Escalade. This is important to note. Plugged in the directions into our GPS and drove down. While we were maybe 100 yards away from our state's capitol building, which is actually pretty nice, the neighborhood this butcher shop was in was not. Street lights were out. Windows were dark. Houses had peeling paint. Some were boarded up and there were no cars in sight, or anyone else around, not even walking their dogs. Something about this place gave me a weird vibe, and I mentioned to my dad that we should get out of there. But we had a mission, and good luck trying to convince my dad to change his mind about something. We go into this butcher shop, and I don't know how in the world they managed to run without a visit from the health inspector, but holy cow, it was bad. It was hot and sticky inside, and I didn't hear any humming from the display cases, meaning the cooling elements weren't working. Inside the grimly display case are pork trotters, pig ears, pork belly, etc., and flies were buzzing. The floors hadn't been mopped or even swept in God knows how long. How do I know this? Because we are leaving shoe imprints, and our shoe imprints were the only ones there. As I pretended to busy myself by browsing the shelves, in reality I was scanning the store and watching the exit for trouble because I did not feel right being there. Dad asked the husband and wife manning the counter about the chorizo, to which they responded that they had just sold out of it, but they had plenty of fresh ingredients to make our own for the right price. As my dad was trying to get his way out of their haggling and asking for directions for the closest grocery store, I noticed movement outside the smudged and smeared glass door. There were 4 burly-looking shadows outside, close to our car, which wasn't the only car out there, but a beautiful Escalade with all the bells, whistles, and had just been detailed. In other words, we were a giant bullseye. Thinking fast, I pretended to look at my phone. "Hey, Dad, Mom asked Louisa, and she had plenty of chorizo," I said, a bit more cheerily than I intended. Before Dad could ask what the heck was going on, I grabbed his arm and tugged on him. After a quick thank you, we got out of there. Fortunately, the burly shapes were gone. My knees were like jello, wobbling, and I was still on the adrenaline high. Dad was looking at me, confused. "Hey, we don't even know a Louisa," he said as he unlocked the car door. "I know. I just wanted to get out of there because I had a bad feeling," I admitted as we both got in, locked the doors, and turned on the ignition. The car's headlights turned on, and not even 10 feet away were the 4 burly shapes. They were just standing there. They were 4 men, middle-aged, dressed in jeans, t-shirts, and caps. I noticed one of them was holding a crowbar, and they started walking towards us. I screamed, "Dad, get out of here!" He didn't need to be told twice. Dad gunned it, and the Escalade, which is built for not only beauty, but speed, accelerated. The men jumped out of the way, and we took off down the road. We didn't stop until we were home. Mom was more glad we were okay than about the chorizo, especially when she learned what happened. Fortunately, we were able to find some the next day at a reputable supermarket that specialized in Latino food. Obviously, I'm so glad nothing happened, but I will always wonder what those men truly wanted. Just our car or something else. This happened about 5 years ago now, but it was such a traumatic experience for me that I remember most of the events in pretty vivid detail. I have PTSD from the experience still that sometimes demobilizes me when I'm home alone, and I only feel safe in a place when I know I have something to defend myself with in every room. I lived in a small, ground-floor basement apartment building, briefly in college with my now ex-boyfriend, Ryan, and another roommate, Alice, who we didn't know previous to moving in. This small apartment building faced another identical one, and the drive sloped down by quite a bit to the side of our building. So the front of our basement apartment was mostly below ground level, but the back was fully exposed and had a back door that opened into a wooded area that you could get to from the parking lot. The front door was inside the building, and you had to go down a flight of stairs from the main front entrance to get to it. We had been living there for about a month when I was doing laundry one stormy night, and strange things started to happen. The laundry room was right across the hall, and I had walked back across to grab more quarters and say something to my boyfriend quickly, so I hadn't closed the front door all the way. I was talking to my boyfriend when I saw the door move a little bit. I thought it was a change in the air pressure from the front door to the building being opened initially, so I kept talking, but kept an eye on it. Then, I watched as it opened by a few more inches. I told my boyfriend to come over, and he rounded the corner just in time to see it open by several more inches. "I see it," he said, and ran out the door. Our front door was at the end of a pretty long hallway, and the door was hung in such a way that I couldn't see who had been standing on the other side of it. Ryan came back and said that he had chased after them just in time to see white tennis shoes and a pale but really long hairy leg going up the stairs, and that it looked like they had gone out the front door of the building. But it was dark and pouring out, and he couldn't find anyone. We kind of just shook it off because we lived near campus and thought some idiot had stumbled in drunk and tried to come in the wrong apartment. 2 or 3 weeks later, it stormed really badly again. This was a really janky college apartment that only had a window AC in the living room, and it was September and still really hot. So we had to sleep that night with the bedroom doors open to get some airflow from the AC. The next morning, I walked into the bathroom to take a shower and saw a bunch of dead bugs in the bathtub, as well as mud and what looked like a footprint. I was mad and thought that Alice had opened the little window in the shower the night before when it was raining, and that the rain had just swept some dead bugs in off the window track. I was noticing at the point that she did some weird voyeuristic things, like opening the window in the shower while she was showering. there was a line of parking spots right outside, and you could see down right into the shower from a parked car with the window open. And leaving her blinds open at night while she had guys in her room, again, you could see right inside. So I made a mental note to mention it to her later. It wasn't until a few days later that Ryan and I were walking down the slope out front and noticed a twisted window screen lying on the grass right outside the bathroom window. I picked it up and my heart absolutely sank. It looked like it had been ripped out of the window. I walked inside and asked Alice about the mud in the bathtub and the footprints and the dead bugs, and she said she hadn't opened the window recently. I suddenly put two and two together and realized that someone had pulled the screen out of the window and come in that night, brushing dead bugs off the window track and leaving muddy footprints in the bathtub, and that we had been sleeping with the door open that night. We looked all around the apartment and couldn't find anything that might have been stolen. Our TV and laptops had been sitting right out in the living room, and they didn't look like they had even been touched. We called the police, they came and took a statement and left. But since nothing had been taken, there wasn't much they could do. I could tell at the time they thought we were overreacting and didn't really believe that anyone had come inside. My now ex was an absolute idiot, and against my urging, put a sign up on the bathroom window that said something along the lines of, "We know we were broken into and are on alert," and was written on a bright pink note card. We had those old windows in the apartment that slid open horizontally, but didn't really lock properly, so I took a heavy stick I had found out in the woods and jammed it in place to stop the window from opening. One night we were up late playing a board game, and I went to use the bathroom, saw the shadow of the stupid note on the opaque window, and went back. Alice went to use the bathroom a few minutes later and came back hysterical because the note had been ripped off. We called the police and they stopped by to take a statement and said they were going to look around the neighborhood. Since the first note had worked so well, Ryan, for reasons I can't fathom, decided to put another sign up, this time on the bright green note card. He opened the window, yelled, and slammed it shut again. I had just had time to catch a glimpse of something white right outside the window, next to his face. I felt like I was going to have a heart attack because I thought it had been a face at the window, but Ryan said it had been a pair of white shoes, and that they looked the same as the ones on the person who tried to come in before. He still put the sign up, against my pleading. I called the police back, and they were back within a couple of minutes, looking annoyed. Apparently, they had been just about to pull out of the parking lot when the call came back in from the dispatcher, and they said they hadn't seen anyone out in the parking lot. I explained to them that there was enough of a slope next to the front windows that if something was standing there, and there were cars parked in the parking spots, you wouldn't be able to see them from the street. One of them told us that he was going to wait around for a bit in his car to see if he could see any suspicious activity. It was a while later when he came back and told us that he hadn't seen anything, and that he had even checked the hoods of the cars outside for warmth to see if any of them had been running recently. I asked him if he had seen anything else like this recently, and when he said no, asked him what he thought this person wanted. He said he did believe us because he could see how shaken we all were, and that maybe this person was just bored and messing with us. I kept reiterating the length of time between these events and the fact that nothing had been stolen out of the apartment when they had more than likely entered the other night. He then admitted that the person could be mentally ill and had possibly developed an unhealthy obsession with one of us. He suggested some ways to improve our home security and left for the night. After he had left, we decided to stay up. We spent the night being pretty quiet, listening for sounds. I want to say it was maybe an hour later, Ryan looked over at the back door, and I heard an, "Oh no," and I saw a piece of something bright green poking through the back door. He opened the door slightly and pulled through the green note card that had somehow been stuffed through the space between the door and the frame. We had been sitting quietly the whole time and hadn't heard the screen door open. He looked outside and didn't see anyone. I became convinced at that point that this person was having fun messing with us, and I was pretty terrified by the fact that they hadn't been scared of the police's presence. I strongly suspected at that point that the pink note card sign was going to make its way back to us, and I wanted to catch them in the act. So we all positioned ourselves looking at the different directions and staked the exits and the bathroom window out. It must have been another hour that passed before we finally got sick of sitting there and stood up and started talking about going to bed because it was almost dawn by that point. This conversation maybe went on for 5 to 10 minutes, and when I looked back at the front door, which I had been watching, the pink note card was laying on the floor, slipped under the door. Things escalated by quite a bit in my remaining time there. For the next month, we'd wake up to the sound of the windows getting pounded on, or it would happen when we turned on the lights in certain rooms. We installed a motion detector by the back door, but it never once went off for anyone other than us. The parking lot was pretty poorly lit, and so was the wooded area out back, so I put the brightest bulbs I could out by the back door. I came out one morning to find the light bulbs smashed and the metal light covers missing. We eventually found them out a few feet into the woods, smashed, like someone had stomped on them. Every light bulb we put out after that got smashed. I had to walk home from work because none of us had cars and spotted the shadow of a male figure standing by the identical building across from ours. When they noticed I had spotted them, they took off running. This happened several more times to my boyfriend and roommate, where they would see the shape of someone out back, and that person would take off running behind the garages or into the woods when spotted. I woke up pretty early one morning, when it was still dark, to work on homework, and saw a light coming through the living room window, like someone was trying to see through the slots on the blinds with a flashlight, which we thankfully had curtains to block. Everything came to a head one night when Ryan and I decided to run to Walmart with a friend. Alice had a really ridiculous habit of drinking while she was cleaning the apartment and leaving the back door open because she didn't like the smell of the cleaning products. I had asked her numerous times not to do this, obviously because of all the issues we had been having, so she said she wouldn't. We got to Walmart, and I'm standing in the hair color aisle, and I start getting all these frantic texts from Alice telling me to call her. I called her, and she was hysterical and said, "2 guys just tried to come in here. You need to come home now. The police are on their way." Apparently she had opened the door as soon as we had left, even though I had told her she absolutely needed to leave it locked, and 2 guys had walked in through the screen door. She had apparently screamed at the top of her lungs and covered her face, and when she looked up, they were gone. She was pretty drunk by that point, and I strongly suspected she was also high from mixing it with her medication. The police were there by the time we got back, and I watched with my heart completely sinking as the officer made disbelieving looks at her while she gave a description of the 2 guys. She was absolutely hysterical by that point, and clearly under the influence, so she kept getting tripped up by questions the police asked and changed her answers. What we got out of it was that they were 2 white guys, one taller and blonde, and the other slightly shorter, but pale with dark black hair. Ryan's friend, who had been at Walmart with us, said that the description fit 2 guys who had walked into the restaurant that he and Ryan worked at a couple of weeks prior. He said the guys walked in, looked around, and tried to see who was in the kitchen area, and then left. He only remembered it because of how suspiciously they were behaving, but he didn't have a whole lot of details on them either. I moved out shortly after that. Ryan left to go to a different college. We broke up, and I didn't want to stick around alone in the place where I felt like my life was constantly in danger. I also didn't want to live with someone who wasn't going to take home security seriously, and advised Alice to also move. My best guess at this point is that these 2 guys lived in one of the surrounding buildings because of how they were able to disappear and reappear so suddenly, but also in such spaced out intervals. It's only conjecture, but I think that because I must have personally seen Alice bring around 30 guys back to the apartment in the time I lived there. One of them might have been someone she met at a bar, or someone who might have watched everything that went on in her room and developed an obsession. I can't prove any of that, and it bothers me endlessly that I don't have an answer. We were never able to even get close to catching them, because of the layout of the apartment building, and because their attacks, quote unquote, were so random. I live in the same town still, and the sight of those woods in my old apartment building still give me goosebumps. I never got to find out who they were or what they wanted, and that bothers me to no end. It brought chills to my bones just recounting everything, and I don't think I've ever truly felt safe being home alone since this happened. In a summer between my years in college, I moved in with my old high school friends. They had a place close to their campus and college party district in our hometown. I attended school in a different city and need a place to stay while I worked over the summer. One roommate was going abroad, so more or less I was subletting. The house they lived in was an older duplex in a corner lot. We lived in the bottom floor, and the top floor was always vacant. The house would have been a prime frat house in its heyday. It had a large porch on one side, large enough for couches and coffee tables. Could easily host 15 people on the porch alone. We spent many summer days and nights on that porch, day drinking and playing music. It wasn't uncommon for us to exchange pleasantries, people walking by on the sidewalk, less than 10 feet from the porch. Most times, people going to party would come around the corner and walk down our street to go to the bars and clubs. Friday and Saturday nights, the crowds would start around 8 p.m., going one direction. Then, the traffic would reverse around 12 a.m. Mostly college-aged crowd with the occasional transient bum or tweaker. Sometimes, random people would ask to come up and chill for a minute. One evening in particular, a man happened to walk by. I saw him come around the corner. He was older than the average college crowd, late 40s or early 50s. He sees me on the porch and I wave and say hello. He continues along the sidewalk in front of the porch. When he is closer, I can tell that he looks weathered. His clothes look worn and old, hair a mess, beard and somewhat dirty, like he had been working outside. He pauses for a minute. I can't remember specifically why. I think he commented on the porch or the weather or something. I do remember that he asked for directions, like is this the way he wants to go? I tell him he is on the right track. He makes a comment about having friends in the area, then just continues on his way. I don't think any more about it. It was a low-key night, mid-summer, just one of those dog days. I think my buddy and I had a few beers, then decided to call it a night early, probably around 10 or 11 p.m., which was early for us. So you understand the layout. My room is on the porch side of the house. It shares a wall with the front door and a window to the porch, with a wall to divide the bedroom from the main room. My friend's room is all the way at the back of the house, a good 30 feet from the front door. I dozed off easily, but was abruptly awakened by a slamming sound. At first I thought my friend was up having a smoke, and maybe slammed the door mistakenly. Before I could make sense of it, I realized it was a violent knocking on the door, like SWAT team style knocking. Still being in a daze, I am like, what the hell is going on? As the third round of knocks shake the wall, I peek from behind the curtain in my room out to the porch, and can see the same guy from earlier beating on the door. He seems out of it, uneasy on his feet and obviously stirred up about something. He starts yelling to me to let him in. Nope. I dropped the curtain and reached for my piece because they are past the point of having a conversation, and I'm feeling like the door may not hold. I thought to myself I don't have time to call the cops, because if this guy comes through the door, my room is the first stop. I go out to the living room about 10 feet back from the door as the fourth barrage begins. He is telling more now. Sounds like he is asking someone to open the door by name. This time I responded with, "You got the wrong house," thinking that maybe will enrage him more or help him get a clue. The banging stops momentarily, like a decision is being made. I hear shuffling but can't tell if he is leaving or just moving around. Suddenly, one more loud burst of knocking, so I give him the same response, this time fully prepared to defend myself if the door swings open. It doesn't. Then silence. then a few seconds of nothing, then more silence. Apparently, that was his last effort. I went back to the window. He was gone, or at least I couldn't see him. Don't think I slept that night, thinking it might just be the first of the night. Fortunately, that was it. I talked to my friend in the morning. He was completely unaware. He said he thought he heard something, but nothing alarming. Goes without saying, lock your doors and always be prepared. It was probably only after my close call that my mind really started to run away with what could have happened were it not for my dog. I am a 26-year-old female. I live with my fiance, my 2 cats, and my dog, Rowan. Our house is literally less than a minute away from a huge farmer's field that is frequented by many dog walkers at all times of the day. Me and my significant other often take turns walking Rowan around the field throughout the day. It was only around 7:30 p.m., and it was still really bright and sunny. Rowan was letting me know it was time to go for a walk, so while my partner was tinkering in the garage, I grabbed his leash and headed to the field. Let me quickly tell you about Rowan. He is a 2-year-old Rottweiler who is very loving and playful, but would not hurt a fly. Not a bad bone in his body. He is also extremely well trained. We made sure to put the effort in, as he's a big dog breed with a bad rep, so wanted to make a point of not feeding stereotypes. I am very much of the opinion there's no bad dogs, just bad owners. Unfortunately, we have had some run-ins with some not so good dog owners, so Rowan gets a little nervous when meeting new dogs and people, but we're working on it. Back to the story. We're walking around the farmer's field. Rowan is off sniffing and peeing on every blade of grass in sight. I always keep an eye out for other walkers anyway, due to Rowan being a little nervous, and I clocked a guy on his own walking down the path towards me, fairly far away. At first I thought nothing of it, as plenty of people walk this route without dogs. We were just coming out of lockdown in the UK. As the guy got closer, I noticed he was in a full tracksuit with the hood up, which was odd, as it was like 23 degrees, so shorts and t-shirt weather. He then took a small path off the field leading through some bushes. It was a public-made shortcut rather than an official public footpath, but it was well enough used, so I kept walking, thinking nothing of it. At about 15 meters away from the path he took, Rowan shot back to my side immediately, dropping the mouthful of dirt he had been pretending not to eat. I petted him and noticed he was standing super alert, staring at the path entrance. When I looked up, I caught a glimpse of the man peeking around the edge of the bushes that concealed the entrance. I stopped dead in my tracks, and Rowan's fur was stood on end as he positioned himself in front of me. It took me a second to realize that this man had been watching and waiting in the bushes for me to approach. My current route would have meant I'd be walking right by the path's opening. My stomach dropped as I realized we were the only ones around on that field. I had this weird moment where I was almost trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. But then, the guy whistled. Not a wolf whistle, but as if to try and get my dog to come to him. Rowan was having none of it though, and I definitely took that as my cue to trust my stranger danger instincts. I immediately turned and sped walked back the way we came, simultaneously pulling my phone out and dialing my partner's number. I ended up having to clip on Rowan's leash to get him to walk with me, and he was not taking his eyes away from the path. He was even growling a little, which was so out of character and put me on edge even more. I glanced back and the man had edged slightly out of the bushes, watching me walk away. My partner answered the phone after a few rings. I was only halfway through stammering out the story, and he was already sprinting up to the field to meet me, telling me to stay on the phone but keep an eye on the man. The man in the tracksuit now fully came out of the bushes and just stood staring at me, walking away. I dared a quick look away from him towards the entrance to the field to see my fiancé jogging towards me. He was relieved I was okay, but was also immediately pointing and shouting, "Is that him?" clearly furious at what this man might have had in mind had Rowan not picked up on him hiding in the bushes. I eventually convinced my fiancé not to confront him, as he was still stood staring, almost taunting us. You never know what people might be capable of, or have concealed. We came off the field and took Rowan on a different walk, which he was more than happy about. I have never been so proud of Rowan for stepping up and protecting me. Safe to say, he got plenty of treats and fussing when we got home. I am female, almost 38 years old, and would like to tell you about an experience that I had with my dog at the time. English is not my first language, so I apologize in advance for any mistakes. It's been about 11 years. It was autumn and night, and I decided to take a little walk around our housing estate with my dog, Sunny. Sunny is a black and big Labrador mix. She is really good and cuddly, but she hates other female dogs. She also has a strong protective instinct and always snarled when she doesn't know or doesn't like someone or something. There were no street lights inside the settlement. The only lighting was always at the house entrances. There was a small park with small playgrounds between the rows of houses, but as already mentioned, everything was in complete darkness. That's why Sunny was not to be seen, only to be heard now and then when she was chasing a rabbit into the bushes. Then it goes without saying that she wasn't on the leash. I only need this when other female dogs are nearby. Sunny listens to my word and always comes when I call her. So, while I strolled comfortably through the dark settlement and froze my ass, Sunny ran happily through the area and the bushes. I always only guessed where she was because I could not see her, only heard from time to time. At some point, I noticed a small shadow that was whizzing around me. When I looked more closely, I could see Sunny. She ran in large circles around me and the place where I was, and I thought she was chasing something. But the circles she drew grew smaller and smaller. She didn't make any noise, and I went on comfortably because I thought she was having her 5 minutes. That's what I would call when someone is going a little crazy. At some point, I didn't hear her anymore, but I went on knowing she would follow. Then, I heard a sound. Footsteps. But they weren't my own. I was startled because they were so close behind me so suddenly. So I turned around, but couldn't see anything, thanks to the darkness. I got nervous and called out for Sunny, because it could have been someone with a dog. Sunny didn't come, and I panicked. She suddenly stood in front of me out of nowhere and began to growl as violently as she ever has before. My blood froze because it couldn't be a good thing. Then she started walking straight ahead, growling about 2 or 3 meters, stopped, and at that moment I recognized a figure, completely in black. This person was shocked in front of Sunny and didn't move, and Sunny started barking like there was no tomorrow. The person slowly walked backward towards the lighted house entrances. Then I saw Sunny bare teeth in front of a young man, wearing a hooded sweater, and probably started to experience the same fears as I did when I noticed him, because as close as he had sneaked up to me, he couldn't have had any good in mind. Since it was too dark, however, he could not see Sunny, and she must have surprised him at the right moment. Sunny started to jump, and at that moment, the guy let out a scream, and you could hear something falling from his hand on the ground. He ran, and my dog followed. After I had released myself from my shock stiffness, I called out to Sunny as loud as I could, until after a short time, she was standing in front of me again, wagging her tail. I took her on the leash and then went back to where the guy had dropped something, and indeed, there was an arm-thick branch on the ground that he certainly didn't have with him to throw sticks. At home, it gradually dawned on me that Sunny did not have her 5 minutes when she circled me, but that she had long since noticed and kept an eye on this person to protect me. On the other hand, that was creepy, but also a relief. I was and still am so grateful for this great dog. So me, my father, and my brother moved into my house around 6 years ago. Cute house on the outside, but you could tell the inside was old and had its problems. Windows would shake when you slammed the front door, which you had to do. There was no heat, old carpets, doors hanging on by threads. Most people would pass the house up because of how poor the conditions were. But because my dad doesn't even lock his doors, safety was of little importance to him. Yeah, I know. Perfect setup to this story. A quarter of the backyard was actually a little motorcycle shop. The house used to be owned by the Hells Angels in the 80s, and you could tell that the shop housed planted weed and was the spot to sell drugs. I knew that many people probably knew of this house. It has rich history. I can't exactly pinpoint the first event, but I know that my quarter of the house freaked me out the most. Basically, when you're in the kitchen, you open a sliding door to a laundry room. Adjacent to that is a small room and then a bathroom. I want you to think long and hard about that setup. Hidden section of the house with a small room, immediate bathroom and laundry room. Gives me chills. Anyway, this was my quarter. Every night that I slept there, I was terrified. My room has 2 windows with no blinds, and every night I felt eyes watching me sleep. I am a natural hot body, so in the summer, my window is always open. One day, me and my brother were hanging out in my room after dark, and as clear as day, we heard someone burp outside my room. We both looked at each other like, "Did you just hear that?" And we both did. When I went to go look outside the window, I couldn't hear anything. If you're thinking of neighbors, don't waste your time. They live too far away to hear something like that so loud. Outside of my window, there is actually a crawl space under the house. Picture a little trap door, and if you pull off the piece of wood, you can easily shimmy under the house right outside my window. Night after night, I would hear footsteps outside, or small branches breaking with weight, though I never checked because my fear left me paralyzed. I would tell my dad, and he would say I'm just hearing ghosts or figments of my imagination. It was annoying, but it's my dad, so I know exactly how he is, and I should have known what to expect. I am really good with energy. I always have been. I can read a room even if my head was in my ass. Many times we would come home, and as soon as I opened the front door, I felt different energy. You only know what I mean if you know what I mean. Someone had been in the house, and I could feel it. They waltzed through here with no care of mind, and slipped out the back of God knows where. I would bellow out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" But no one would answer. I would run to every corner of the house and check for strangers, but never found one. I live in Canada. Everyone blazes here. I used to go outside to do it, but it just became unsafe. Before that happened, I would go smoke in the bike shop. I had a bong and bud and a lighter. One night, I thought I would go to bed, but leave the bong and bud in the shed, because why take it out if I'm just coming back tomorrow? The next day, I came back to my weed gone, and my bong used. You could tell as there was new resin on the bowl. This was my first confirmation that I wasn't actually going crazy, and that everything I had been hearing or feeling was real. I grabbed my stuff and ran in the house. I never smoked outside again. Some days I would have to go to the shed to grab something of mine, and some days I would look into the black abyss that was the shed, and shudder as my bones turned ice cold. Whoever was in the shed at the time had horrible, horrible energy. Just looking into the shed made me feel sick and lightheaded. You couldn't pay me money to go inside during those moments. Any item I've ever had that I cherished, I have lost here. I have never lost so many things before, but I often joke around that this house has a mouth, and it's always eating everything of importance. My dad thinks it's funny, but I know the truth. One night I got really drunk and dropped my diamond bracelet in my backyard in the snow. The next morning I realized it was gone. I was devastated, but knew it could only be outside. We waited for the snow to melt, but when we went outside to look for it, it was gone. I never found that bracelet, just like I have never found many of the other things I have lost here. Some days we will come home and the front door will be open. Some days we will come home and the back door will be open. Some days I will come home and look for something I set down and will either never find it or find it in a different room. One day, I was standing in front of my front door, but I was facing the road, just observing. All of a sudden, I notice a man tinkering with the RV parked in our driveway. He doesn't notice me yet. I watch him pick at the aluminum exterior as if he were trying to rip the outside wall apart. He finally sees me and hides behind the RV. I call out, "Hey! Hey!" But he disappears into the laneway. I told my dad some guy was tinkering with the outside of the RV, and he basically tells me, "What you gonna do?" I don't know. I'm pretty numb to this situation. I have been begging my dad to start locking his doors, get cameras, or even just listen to what I'm trying to tell him. I have been gathering evidence and documenting situations for 6 years. You think the man would listen to me? Let me know if I'm just dumb or if he is an airhead and I have been right all along. Please let me know because this situation has made me a little insane in the membrane. One day, I come to my father crying. I tell him I saw shadows of a man pacing outside my window last night, near the window with the trapdoor and crawl space below it. He says, "What do you want me to do about it?" I said, "I don't know, anything. Just check the crawl space." He shines a flashlight around there. Keep in mind the crawl space loops around the house, so there could be someone around the loop and in the opposite side of the house, and my dad would never know because he never actually looked, just glanced. He puts the trapdoor back on and secures it, telling me, "You'll be fine, nothing will happen to you," and we go on with our day. Sometime later, obviously after I have forgotten about it, I was in the backyard. Something caught my eye, so I looked near the crawl space, and lo and behold, the trapdoor was ripped off and something shiny lay on the ground inside. I took a closer look, and believe it or not, dozens of tiny squares of burnt tinfoil lay on the ground. I have hung out with enough people to know exactly what that means. Now I know someone is smoking hard drugs directly below my window. I tell my dad and show him, and he tells me, "Oh, it could be anything." Of course. One day I was also standing outside my house, and a black Subaru Forester pulls up and calls me to the car, by name. They have a softball in their hands and asks me if I want the ball. They're trying to get me to grab it. I watch enough true crime to know they likely want to pull me into their vehicle. I stay where I am, and they speed off down the road and turn up the road adjacent to mine. They start doing loops. I tell my family about it, and my brother mentions he saw the same car go by earlier, twice, and that he noticed it because the back window was completely covered with duct tape. This went on for about a month. Cops were called, but they couldn't do anything because no crime was committed. Weeks go by, and my dad started to seem mad at me, but I could never pinpoint why. One time we had an argument, and out of the blue he asks me if I have been smoking meth. What? I am as hippy-dippy as you get. I guess he thought, with me always talking about someone being here that we don't know of, he assumed I was crazy and was actually doing drugs to become like that. I ask him why on earth he would think that, and he starts to lead me to the shed. He takes me to the very back corner of it, and what do you know? There's a cracked, straight tube glass pipe on the table. I can't believe that after everything that's happened, my dad would assume I am smoking crystal in the shed, rather than the obvious person or persons I have been noticing around here. Did I mention that my dad and brother hear sounds coming from the crawl space all the time, every night? Guess what they chalk it up to be? No, really, guess. Raccoons and pipes. What would you do? After 6 years of noticing someone squatting at your house, and 6 years of being told that you're crazy and nothing is actually happening, You start to get numb to new situations and also start to actually believe that you are crazy. I know I'm not, but still, I just don't know what to do anymore. So to preface this, I was young, maybe 18 or 19, and had no idea what we were getting into. So my father owns 3 businesses and was actively dating his business partner and was providing for her. She also made advances on me, which kinda creeped me out. She would buy us all food, and at first, I was grateful. But then I started becoming nervous as she wanted to be alone with me a lot. My father ended up getting married, but didn't tell her, and she got really upset at him and told me not to tell her. She came to my job and demanded to see my father, to which I told her he wasn't there. She screamed at me and said we would soon regret it. Due to the disturbing nature, I called the cops, and all they did was take my name and didn't actually look into it. So fast forward, I come home around 12 o'clock midnight, as I had just come from my second job, dead tired from school and work. I ate and crashed on my bed. It had to be at least 3 in the morning when I heard my door open. At first, I didn't move, because I assumed it was my calico cat, Misty, pawing at my door as she liked to sleep with me. When I groaned her name and she didn't answer, it struck me strange, but I wasn't worried until I felt a presence standing over me. I quickly woke up and discovered my father's ex in our house, above me, crazy-eyed. She was screaming, saying how she would get her revenge on my father. I quickly rolled out of my bed, ran past her, and called the authorities. She openly tried to fight my father's wife and tried to stab my dad. The police came and arrested her on the spot. That was the scariest thing I have ever been through, and I'm glad I will never see her again. Now I sleep with a blade next to my bed and a taser. Please be careful, as you never know who might pay you a late night visit. At the time of these events, my brother, my father, and I, 16 years old at the time, are road tripping through Nevada and California as my graduation gift. It is the end of August, and after a long trip, coming from Las Vegas, cruising through Los Angeles, and heading north across California, we decided to stay in beautiful Santa Barbara for a few days. My father finds a motel not too far from the beach, and we are all in wonder as to the movie-like beauty of the city we are staying in. On the evening of our first night there, getting back to the motel shortly after feasting on greasy and savory pizza from Rusty's Pizza Parlor and walking along one of the most beautiful beaches in the USA, I start to get bored in the room after having watched the television with my father and my brother for about an hour. To change the scenery a bit, I decide to peek through our room window. As I kneel on the raspy, purple carpeted floor and draw the thick and heavy curtains outward, a sense of dread invades my whole being. I am startled by the thing I see right across the street, about 100 feet from my window. What I'm looking at is at odds with the beautiful picture-like frame created by the motel lobby entrance arch, delimiting it from my field of view. A beautiful shadow and light setting created by the streetlight beam on the pavement on the other side of the road reveals this man right under the streetlight. He is standing half in the light, half in the dark of the night, as if in the knowledge of the effect the lighting has on him. He looks like he is in his late 20s, early 30s, and stares right at me. His gaze like a laser beam I can feel all the way down to my kidneys. I can't see his crazy eyes from this distance, but I can feel them, and my subconscious picks up on the intent, which is not good. He seems to have waited for me to look at him for a long time, as if he knew it would happen. A few seconds after he is made aware of my awareness of his presence, he starts in a slow clockwork motion, sliding his index finger sideways across his throat, underneath his jaw, from left to right, over and over again. As the floor beneath me starts to sink and a taste of metal overwhelms the underside of my tongue, I close the curtains as quickly as if my life depends on it. I then turn my upper body away from the window toward my father and tell him what I just saw. He seems to shrug it off, and talking over the baseball game on TV tells me to let it go. But I can feel, along with this calm vibe of carefreeness coming from him, a hint of uneasiness that I can pick up sharply. 30 seconds go by, and I stupidly kneel uncomfortably again on the motel carpet in front of the windowsill. After loudly swallowing for luck, against my best judgment, I draw the curtains out a second time. But this time, my hands stop at the width of my head, allowing into view just enough of the outside world to be able to grasp at what is happening outside of my seemingly safe motel room. There he is again, only this time, the man is standing 2/3 of the way to where he stood the first time I saw him. His facial traits are now darkened by the lack of the streetlight, but I can still feel his crazy gaze. He is under the motel lobby parking lot arch. There is not much light where he stands, but I can still perceive him doing his throat-slicing gesture. Now I'm starting to feel queasy and frightened. I close the curtains quickly once again and tell my dad again of the man's presence and his approaching of the room. I get on the bed, trying to concentrate on the TV to forget what I have just witnessed. I don't remember if my dad looks through the window to confirm what's happening. I remember him telling me to stop looking outside if what I see is scaring me, and that we are safe in the room, which is locked. After what seemed like a few minutes passing, I peek again for the last time. This time, the man is right in the parking lot, about 50 feet from our motel room, doing his gesture again. I start thinking that the man is probably mentally ill or something, and that I just have to stop looking out the window. A clever thing to do, I tell myself. The night goes on with that feeling that even if I'm probably safe inside our room, there is this disturbed man outside the room who is missing a few cogs that want nothing good from me. He could be leaning right on the window glass a few minutes from now if this keeps going. I try not to think about it, but sleep uneasily that night. The following morning, not wanting to go outside of the room, I decide to stay in with my brother while my father goes in the motel lobby to fetch orange juice, breakfast, and to speak to the motel clerk about the man outside. My father comes back after a few minutes with our breakfast and tells me that the clerk told him that the guy who frightened me the night before is known in the area for his mental illnesses. He's probably a schizophrenic, is what the guy said to my father. My dad then reassures me that the clerk told him that the man is not dangerous and that we are safe staying there for another couple of nights. Luckily, I never see the man again for the duration of our stay there. Fast forward a couple of years. My father and I are reminiscing about our trip to California, and especially about those days in Santa Barbara, when the mentally ill man threatening me with his finger outside of our motel room is mentioned in that conversation. My father, as if relieved from not having to keep this secret anymore, lets out that the morning after that dreadful night, the motel clerk had, in fact, told him to be careful with that man. He had told him that he was, in fact, dangerous. My dad just didn't want to scare us, telling us the truth. I thanked him for lying to me that morning, and we agreed that luckily, we never saw the man again during our stay there. This happened when both me and my friend Jay were 15. I was spending the night at his house, as I often did. It was a normal enough night. We watched movies, played a couple video games, and stayed up way too late. It was about 2 a.m., I think, when we heard a loud banging coming from the front door. Luckily at the time we were in his kitchen at the back of the house, so no one could see us. We were spooked because there shouldn't have been anyone at the door at this hour, but we figured it was just some drunk person and they would go away soon enough. After 30 seconds, there was more banging on the door and yelling that neither of us could understand. It sounded like an adult man and he sounded angry, so we were both scared. He texted his mom, who we thought was upstairs, but she said that she had left a bit before without saying anything. She did that often enough. She liked to go to her friend's house in the middle of the night, so we didn't pay any attention or notice when she left. We didn't know what to do, as we were scared to call the police based off past experiences with cops in our small town being not the best. At this point, we turned off the kitchen light and we're ducked down on the ground. We heard the banging and yelling get louder, and I decided to see who it was, if it was anyone we knew. I army crawled through the dining room, which was also dark, and peeked through the door to the living room, which is where the front door was. There is also a huge window by the door that you can see right into the dining room through, so I was very careful not to be seen. I couldn't see any details of the man, but he looked to be about 6 feet tall and had gray hair. I crawled back to Jay and we quietly decided what to do. The banging stopped, so we decided to wait a bit before seeing if it was safe. We also decided to go under the table in the dining room in case he tried to come around back, which is where the kitchen was. After around 10 minutes of silence, we rock, paper, scissored for who had to check if he was out there. And of course, I lost. So I again army crawled to the dining room door. I saw the man staring through the window, hands cupped against the glass. I made eye contact with him the moment he saw me, and I loudly said, "Crap," causing my friend to panic and crawl behind me. I saw him pull out his phone. He told me later that he was texting his mom to come home and save us. The man started yelling again, and this time we could make out a bit more of what he said. It was mostly cussing, although I definitely heard the phrase, "I'm going to kill you," in there a couple times. I quickly looked past the man to see if the neighbors seemed to notice him, but no luck. I crawled back out of his sight and again discussed what to do with my friend. We decided to go into the basement for safety, which you could get to by moving the fridge. Confusing house, I know, but it was really old and not meant for modern-sized appliances. We pull out the fridge and get into the basement, feeling mostly safe, but still terrified. I start having a panic attack, although I'm trying to hold it together the best I can for Jay, who is also on the verge of a panic attack. We hear a gunshot and shattering glass from above us, and I cover my mouth so I don't scream. Jay and I look at each other, terrified. We hear loud footsteps and yelling above us, the man asking where we were. We hear him going upstairs and moving around up there for a bit. He eventually comes back down and starts turning over furniture, I'm assuming to find us. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, Jay's mom pulls into the driveway, which scares the guy as he runs out the back door in the kitchen. Jay and I get out of the basement and run to greet his mom, never happier to see her. She was shocked by the state of the house and hugged us, happy that we were safe and scared by how close we were to being hurt. We were all very scared. After that night, they had better security installed, and we went over safety protocol if anything ever happened again. Luckily, it hasn't happened again, yet. Although when I go to his house, I'm still a bit scared. We never called the police because we knew there wasn't much they could do. We just cleaned up and moved on. I live in a fairly large town, and the crime rate is pretty low. I am a teenager, and due to this quarantine, I haven't been able to get out and meet my friends as much as I would like to. So when my mom told me that she was going out, and she wouldn't hate company, I jumped at the chance. I'm fairly popular in my school, and I do have a lot of friends, and not seeing them has taken a toll on my life, and I would love to meet with them once all of this was over. But the rules in town regarding quarantine are pretty strict until the total count of people affected in our area goes down. We have a lot of grocery shops in this town, and the one where we go to is pretty big. My mom and I decided to go there, and I waited in the car because I didn't really feel like going in. I am kind of a germaphobe. I have no problem roaming around in the streets where I live, but going to a shop where so many people have been during this pandemic seems very weird to me. I know I might be coming off as a spoiled brat, but that's just how I am, and that's just how I've always been. My mom went inside the store, and she's being the most overprotective mom, taking the car keys with her and locking the car, which now I am very thankful for. So as most cars have very thick windows and you can't really understand what somebody on the other side of the window is saying unless they're shouting, our car was no different, and this is important. My mom told me that it would take her about 15 to 20 minutes to get all of the supplies that we needed. I didn't mind that because I got to blast my music in the car, which she does not allow when she's in it. About 5 minutes after she walked away, I was blasting the music, and she called me. She told me that there was a big line in the store, so it would take her extra time, and again, I did not mind, because I got to listen to music the way I wanted, and that's all I wanted. 10 minutes after that, I had my eyes closed, and I hear this tapping. At first, I dismissed it at some part of the song that I had never caught before. But then, the tapping got frantic, and I realized that someone was tapping on the window on the driver's side of the car. I thought it was my mom and she dropped her keys somewhere and she couldn't get in, or she wanted something. But when I opened my eyes to see who it was a tall man about 6 feet and looked like he was high on drugs. I turned off the music and shouted, "Can I help you?" He didn't respond, but then abruptly started shouting at the top of his lungs, "Let me in. I said, let me in." I was in such shock because I had never seen this man in my entire life. I already had my phone on me and I was starting to dial my mom's number. Then, what he did next will give me goosebumps for the rest of my life. He suddenly lowered his voice, looked me in the eye, and said, "Honey, let me in. Darling, I promise I won't hurt you. Let me in. Let me in, sweetie." In a very calm and sweet voice, like how you would talk to a toddler when they're making a mess. I was shaking so hard that I could not dial the correct number to my mom's phone, and I started searching for her contact on my phone. I know, very dumb, considering there's a psychopath that's about to kill me outside my window. Then he started screaming, "I will kill you. You are going to regret not letting me in," and starts banging his whole body against the car. I know he couldn't get into the vehicle because the windows are very secure, and he was relatively thin and looked to be in his late 40s, and I was pretty sure that he did not have the power needed to get inside the car without me unlocking it. I dialed my mom, and he was still screaming at the top of his lungs, calling me every swear word in the book. My mom answered the phone and heard what was happening, and she came running outside and saw the psychopath trying to hurt her daughter, and she went off. She started hitting him with the stuff that she had just bought from inside, and then when the employees heard the commotion and decided to step in, the police were called, and one employee held the man in place. I was crying and shaking and having a full-on anxiety attack. The police showed up in about 5 minutes, and he was arrested. We later found out that he had taken large doses of heroin. It was the scariest thing I have ever experienced in my life. The way that he said it, that he wouldn't hurt me if I had let him in the car. Man, he's in jail now, and I couldn't be happier about it. This happened a few years ago in my old one-person flat. I had a strange feeling that something wasn't right for a few days. Like I was sure that food in the fridge was less than I put back the last time. I found pillows from my couch on the floor, stuff like that. I lived alone back then, so there wasn't anyone else with access to my flat, or so I thought. One night, I woke up around 1 a.m, sweating, and even though I didn't remember, was sure I woke from a nightmare. Since I was drenched in sweat, I decided to take a shower, so I put my phone up in the bathroom for music, turned on the water and enjoyed my shower. A few minutes in, I heard the door move. I never close it, but it still never moves. I took a look at the shower curtain and saw a shadow against it, and a look at my phone confirmed someone was there, since I could clearly see a reflection on my screen that showed someone was standing next to the shower curtain. It took me a lot not to scream and to keep acting like I didn't notice anything, while silently taking the shower head off and holding and turning the water all the way to hot. I am still kinda impressed with that quick thinking. Our water got really hot when you cranked it all the way up, and a few seconds later steam was rising, and the water was hurting my feet, flowing to the drain. I turned around, ripped the shower curtain open, and held the shower head right at the person behind it. It was a woman. She screamed in pain. I whacked her in the face with the shower head, jumped out of the shower, and ran to the door, taking the key out of the lock and locking it close behind me. A little bit later, she started to bang on the door, but the door didn't give. Thank God for German quality work. I called the cops and went to the kitchen to get my big kitchen knife, just for safety. I felt like my throat was closing up when I saw that the knife was missing and realized there's only one place where it could possibly be right now. The police came and arrested the woman, who turned out to have been the former person living in the flat and was evicted after not paying rent. Seems that she made a copy of the key and came into the flat when I was at work, and sometimes at night. It is possible that what woke me up in the first place was her, and honestly, I don't even want to think about it. Ever since then, I always insist that the locks are changed when I move into a new place. This happened about 2.5 years ago in the winter of 2017, early 2018. My partner and I were living in the center of a popular and busy city in England at the time, in a ground floor flat. The street we lived on was just off a very busy road that had about 1,000 pubs on it, so it was normally quite populated at all hours, most days. The flat we lived in was one of about 7 in an old converted bakery. There was a very large locked wooden gate with a buzzer, and the flats were all in a courtyard behind the gate. We shared the flat with my mom. Our bedroom windows both faced directly onto the street, where people would walk past on the pavement. On this given night, it must have been around 2 a.m. My girlfriend and I were laying on my bed watching films on my laptop. My bedroom was a tiny shoebox-sized room, with a bed and a wardrobe, and about 5 square feet of extra floor space. Tiny. My window was right next to my bed and faced out onto the street. As we were laying on my bed, someone knocked on my window. That wasn't unusual, as I had quite a few friends that lived and worked near my flat, so we didn't think much of it. We continued watching our film and settled down. About half an hour to 45 minutes later, there was a massive bang on my window that sounded like someone had slammed their fist against it and ran off. We were a bit startled and decided to go take a look outside, as it was evidently not one of my friends at this point. We went into the courtyard and opened the main gate and couldn't see anyone on the street at all. It was freezing and snowing, but still unusually quiet. We stood there for about 5 minutes just looking around. I noticed a man on the other side of the street wearing a mid-length trench coat and heavy boots, but as my eyesight is awful and I never wear my glasses, I didn't see any discerning features. He was on the opposite side of the street and was walking along the street from the main road, from left to right, up towards our flat. I got a bit of a strange vibe from him and pointed him out to my girlfriend. We both just stood and watched for a few minutes, and as he passed, he didn't turn to look at us or anything. After less than a minute, I looked to my right and saw this same guy had now crossed over to our side of the street and was now walking towards us. My girlfriend and I watched for a minute and then proceeded to panic and shut ourselves behind the gate. Instead of going back into our flat, we crouched down out of sight so that we could watch through the gap under the gate to see if he passed by. The thing I remember the most vividly is the sound of his boots creaking on the snow and watching him come to a deep stop directly outside the gate. My girlfriend and I were both now suitably crapping ourselves, and we quietly hurried back inside. Our flat had an open-plan kitchen and living room, with a door that led into the straight hallway. My bedroom was right at the end of the hallway, and my mom was off to the right. All of the lights were off, and I poked my head into the hall as I had a clear line of sight into my bedroom from there. When I looked, I could see the silhouette of this man pacing up and down, slowly outside my bedroom window. My mom had slept soundly through all of this, but I decided to go in and wake her up to let her know what was going on. She brushed it off until I told her to look outside, and she saw this man, now pacing back and forth outside her window and mine. Knowing that at the right angle you could see through my blinds from outside, I pressed myself up against the wall and scooted my way down the hallway back to the living room and rang the police. My girlfriend and I weren't really sure what to make of the situation, but it felt pretty ominous. The police arrived about 10 minutes later and met me outside. They said they found him, and he claimed to be homeless, looking for a place to stay, but that he was very well dressed and clean-shaven and had no other possessions with him. The police officer offered forth the fact that it's more likely that he was intrigued by the fact that there were two obviously queer young femmes in bed together and was having a little snoop. Who knows? The next day, I was outside having a cigarette with my girlfriend, and I noticed a very prominent, sticky handprint on my window, as if someone had their hand pressed up against it, looking in. No thanks. My girlfriend swears she saw him at the train station a few months later. So this happened about 3 years ago when I was a sophomore in college. I had just moved into my very first apartment with my best friend, Ron. On par with most first apartments, it was the cheapest 4 walls and a roof that we could afford. With that being said, we were witness to a lot of questionable activities as our complex was home to a fair amount of eccentric people. Yet the freedom of having your very own place is exhilarating, and acted as a sort of counterbalance to the shenanigans that were commonplace in our new community. In any case, we made sure to be vigilant and keep our doors locked. Well, most of the time. It was a Monday around 2 in the afternoon, and I was just getting back from my morning string of classes. Ron dabbles in gamer culture and would usually be going to bed when I got up, around 9 a.m., so he was dead asleep. I was in sort of a rush as I had to finish up a paper for my 4 p.m. class, so I went swiftly to my room. I pulled out my laptop, plugged in my headphones, and began to type away. After about 30 minutes of typing, ABBA blaring in my ears, I noticed my door begin to open. The movement was lethargic and cautious, yet it stopped abruptly after the door had been opened about an inch wide. More specifically after I took notice. Unable to see anything through the open sliver, I became inquisitive. Assuming it's Ron, I call out, "What?" No response. "What do you want?" No response. "Bro, what the hell do you want?" The door remained cracked as I demanded answers until my annoyance became clear and my tone began to change. Then, it methodically closed as slowly as it was opened. So slow, in fact, it almost didn't latch. Still under the assumption it was Ron, I began to get even more annoyed. Ron and I have a colorful relationship, so we frequently yell or swear at each other. "Bro, seriously, what the hell do you want? I'm trying to write a paper." "Ron? Ron, stop messing with me, bro, and just tell me what you want." After about the third yell, something makes my heart sink to my stomach. Bells begin to ring in my head, and my gut is convinced something is wrong. It wasn't like Ron to mess with me like that, And even if he did decide to break habit, he would have come back and done the "it's just a prank, bro" routine long before I started yelling. I sprung up from my bed, heart racing, blood pumping, adrenaline flowing. I reached under my pillow and grasped the cold metal sheath of the M7 bayonet that my dad had bought me some years ago. I take the blade out and begin to move toward the door, cautiously calling out to Ron one last time, just to make sure my paranoia isn't getting the best of me. "All right, Ron, did you need something?" Greeted with silence yet again, I take that as my cue to exit the room. I grasp the doorknob and begin to twist ever so slowly, my stomach twisting right alongside it. With a distinctive click, the door unlatches, and I begin to tenderly open it. As soon as there's enough room, I peer my head out into the hallway. Nothing. I finally step out, and as my body crosses the threshold from room to hallway, my adrenaline spikes. Knife in hand, I make my way to the living room with a simultaneous sense of cautiousness and urgency. I make the 15-foot journey to the living room and do a scan of the area. Nothing. Upon seeing the empty, quiet living room, my body immediately relaxes. My grip on the handle of the bayonet loosens, allowing my knuckles to go from a ghostly white back to their normal pink fleshy color. However, my moment of relief was short-lived, as something dawned on me. The living room was empty, as in devoid of human presence. I turn back to the hallway and sprint to Ron's door. Unafraid to forego common courtesy, I barge right in. As the door swings open and I take my first steps inside, I am once again met with a gut-wrenching feeling and a modest spike of adrenaline. Ron was dead asleep. With a mix of yelling and shaking, I finally wake him up. A very groggy and pissed off Ron mumbles, "What?" over my franticness. Already knowing the answer, I ask one question out of denial and hope. "Did you open my door a couple minutes ago?" "No." "What?" As the sound of the most hated word in the English language fell upon my ears, I was already halfway out of Ron's room. As I re-entered the living room, I gave things a second look. Upon further inspection, I noticed the absence of my Xbox, my roommate's PS4, and my roommate's backpack, filled with expensive college textbooks and his laptop. I sprint out the front door and up the stairs to the outside of my complex, desperately trying to see someone carrying a backpack and/or our game consoles. I run the perimeter and find nothing. Defeated, I make my way back to the apartment and find Ron standing in the living room. Still groggy and very much confused, I explain the situation we now found ourselves in. We called the cops, which took our statements, and nothing more. The interactions we had with the PD is another long story, but to sum them up, the person who opened my door that day was never arrested. This is in spite of the fact it is considered felony home invasion, since Ron and I were both home, and my father and I literally figured out who did it. So, unless it's to give me back my Xbox, or Ron his PS4 and backpack, I really hope I never come into contact with this person again. Now, I am not very good at reading people, unlike my landlord. When I first met Kareem, he seemed polite enough. He was super tidy, filled the house with amazing smelling cooking, and best of all, he stayed out of my way. I am kind of a loner and stayed holed up in my room with the company of my gerbils to quietly study and play Minecraft. We didn't cross paths often when the school year started in September. He was the replacement for my housemate. It's a 3-bedroom apartment, and I had been living with another girl, Nellie, for a year already. She was pretty absent from the house, as she was almost always at her boyfriend's place, and the third housemate had moved out. Early on, he was honest about some elements of his past that I should have taken as a warning, but took as him being earnest. I had asked him during his mini-interviewing process that Nellie and I were holding for potential tenants if he was 420 friendly. He was, but as it turned out, he was a little too friendly. A couple years ago, he had been arrested for illegal possession of weed and sent back to his home country, Turkey, for a year before being allowed back into Canada to continue his studies. I don't know how this kind of stuff works, to be honest, but that's what he told us. I try not to be a judgmental person, since he made it seem like it was a thing of the past. This was not the case. One of the first things I had noticed in September was that he smoked almost constantly. Not to the point of missing classes, but the whole house would stink up multiple times a week in the evening. Normally I wouldn't mind a little smoke, but any stoner will tell you that each strain is different, and for whatever reason, his weed caused really severe panic attacks for me. Around late October, I got sick of it and told him to figure out how to contain it to his room, and he said the joints are hard to contain and that he needs a bong. I let him borrow my bong. About 2 weeks later, in November, Kareem said that he had broken the downstem, but that he would replace it. Within a few days, he did replace it, but it was the wrong size. Maybe it was a bit bitchy of me, but I told him to buy the right size. He refused, said it was too expensive. I don't know, it's my property. He broke it. He should fix it appropriately, right? What I know was not out of line, however, was what I did after what happened in mid-February. After January, my landlord said we should start looking for new housemates, which was reasonable enough. Not to Kareem, though. My landlord has always been slow at responding to messages due to the nature of her job, but he absolutely hated her guts for it. Called her a bitch and every name under the sun behind her back, which made me feel weird considering I had been her tenant for 3 years now, and we were on good terms. Before I move on to the next part, I'd like to quickly add that at one point during the housemate hunting process, he asked me if I would be willing to move out so that his friends could move in, and that it would be super amazing if I did. Obviously, I said no. My landlord later confirmed that he had asked her if he could sign the lease behind my back. As I mentioned earlier, we have forged a good rapport over the last few years, so it was a firm no. Kareem got excessively antagonistic about my landlord's deadline when she wanted us to sign the lease. Started looking up the law, saying he legally didn't need to give her notice until X date, which was not true. He told me to quietly look for housemates and tell the landlord at the last possible date, which made me super uncomfortable since it was around midterms, and was secretly grateful she was pushing for the deadline so strongly. I just wanted it over with. It was shortly before I signed the lease with my new housemates that he showed how truly two-faced he was. I dug through our Facebook messages. The gist of the conversation was this. Kareem said, "Can I use your laundry after I move out? I don't have laundry on site." I responded, "No, that's kinda weird." Kareem said, "No, it's not. We'll pay you." I responded, "We?" Kareem said, "Me and my housemates." I would like to note, I never met these housemates before and still have no idea who they are. At this point, I started getting extremely weirded out. I said no a few times, but caved and started saying stuff like, "I'll think about it," to appease him, though I had zero intent on letting him use my stuff. It seemed like the best way to get him off my back, since for almost a week, he would continuously pressure me and try to get me to say yes. Things hit the first of two crescendos when, the day before me and the two new tenants I chose, super awesome guys by the way, were supposed to sign the new lease. Back to Facebook, and again, an approximation of our conversation goes like this. Kareem says, "If you don't promise to let me use your laundry next year, I'm going to make a scene in front of your housemates." I responded, "A scene?" Kareem said, "When they come sign the lease with her, I'm going to tell them how awful our landlord is, that she doesn't care about us, and is terrible at replying to our messages. If you let me use your laundry, I'll wait until they leave to tell her to her face." In other words, he was going to make my new housemates question my judgment and make them think I was a bad person or something. Why else would he go off in front of them and my landlord and tell them she was a horrible and nasty person? He later claimed these messages were a joke, to which I messaged back asking where the punchline was, because I didn't see it. I felt like a badass saying that, not gonna lie, especially since he never got around to explaining this supposed joke. At this point, I had a bit of a breakdown. I called my landlord that night when Kareem had left the house for a few hours, letting her know exactly what had happened, what he was planning to do the next day, even sending her screenshots of our Facebook messages, and telling her I couldn't let her and my new housemates come over in good conscience. Call me a snitch, I don't care. This guy does martial arts 3 times a week, and, despite being shorter than me, could definitely send me through drywall if he felt like it. I felt threatened, and didn't know what he would do if he found out I told her, and was the reason signing the lease was rescheduled to a different time and location. She believed me, especially when she read all the text messages, full context, nothing conveniently cropped. She even saw the parts where I was playing along and calling her a bitch too. That's when she told me that she had seen straight through his act while he was signing the lease. Apparently, he spent half an hour reading and rereading our lease, which is abnormal, asking weird questions, being rude to her. After years of being a landlord, she could clearly see that he's the type of overly macho guy that likes to control women, but gave me the benefit of the doubt. Not to get political, but even as an anti-feminist, I am inclined to agree, especially looking in hindsight at how he's treated the women, me, the landlord, Nellie, versus men in our lives. After losing all 4 years of my free time in high school to the feminist movement, you would think I would be able to spot someone as blatantly misogynistic as him, but apparently not. Turns out this special brand of douchebag isn't a boogeyman after all. At least now I know one when I see one. I signed the lease with my new housemates the next day at a coffee shop, telling Kareem that it was out of the blue, that we were signing elsewhere and I had no idea why we changed plans. And I thought that I had gotten away with telling on him, until my landlord sent him a letter from her lawyer that very clearly stated that he would not be allowed to demand the use of laundry again, and that if he came back to the house after moving out, it would be considered trespassing. At first I thought it was an overreaction on her part, but looking back on those messages, I can see why she made that decision. He angrily knocked on my door and shoved the letter in my hands when he got it that day, aggressively and quite frankly, melodramatically saying, "You betrayed me." I bullcrap you not. Those were his exact words. I think he lost his grip on me since he could no longer pressure me, now that the secret was out, which frustrated him. Anyone who has been treated poorly by a misogynist or a misandrist can probably relate to that particular type of control and how it feels to wiggle out of it. Things settled down, temporarily. He retaliated in small ways, going out of his way to not sort the recycling in proper bins, not cleaning out the shower drain, putting plastic and metal in the compost bin, and smoking weed excessively. They were small, but irritated me. It was the day after he moved out that we reached our second and final crescendo, which led to the police report. After months of stuffing a shirt under the crack of my door to keep the weed stink out, and generally being freaked out to the point of carrying a small kitchen knife in my pocket whenever I left my room after the laundry incident, you can bet your ass I was counting down those last days, gleefully. He said he left a few things behind from the kitchen. He came along with a friend and, tensely but amicably, we sorted out whose Tupperware was whose. On his way out, he spotted my mop and bucket. He claimed it was his and that he wanted it back. I had had this mop and bucket for 2 years. Why the hell was he claiming it was his? I said no, and he started roaming around the house, saying that he wanted his mop and bucket, and that if this was mine, his must be elsewhere, which made me uncomfortable as hell. I diffused the situation by saying I wanted to use it and would give it back later. I was planning on keeping it. I am under zero obligation to let him back in. Remember the letter that said him coming back in the house after he moves out is trespassing? And he instantly snapped out of it. Later that day, he even said I could keep it. Why he changed his mind is beyond me. The next day, Kareem said that he had left 2 more items behind. I was irritated at this point. I just wanted to be left alone. I said I would leave it outside. I admit, I definitely shouldn't have done what I did next. I was annoying, and I cringe when I read my own messages, but his reaction was completely out of proportion. Kareem said, "I'll stop by in a few hours. I just got out of the shower." I responded, "I'm busy. Can't you come by now? Just throw on some shoes and shorts and a t-shirt. Nobody's outside." By the way, at this point my town has been in COVID-19 lockdown for 2 months. Since it's a university town, and I live in an area almost exclusively populated by students, nearly everyone was gone, and it's been a ghost town for weeks. I should also note, he had not been taking good social distancing measures whenever he was over, and had zero problem getting up close, even though he had recently been to a much bigger city with a bad outbreak. Just thought that I would point that out. Kareem responds, "Fine, then give me my mop and bucket." I respond, "You said I could have it." Kareem says, "Give it back." I respond, "No." I put the 2 items, a tray and mug, on the porch. A few minutes later, I heard a polite knock. I knew it was him and ignored it. A few seconds later, a ring on the doorbell. Another ring. A louder knock. He kept ringing the doorbell over and over. Exasperated, I opened it and he stood there smiling. "Give me my mop and bucket." No. I quickly shut the door. Truth be told, I was worried he would try and stick his foot in the door and try and stop me from closing it. But he didn't move. He started knocking again and ringing the doorbell repeatedly. At first it was with some time in between, a few seconds, but it grew in frequency and volume. It went from firm knocking to louder, angry knocking. It felt like I was running a marathon. My heart was beating so fast, since he started straight up pounding on the door so hard I could see it move, literally screaming, "Give me my things," over and over at the top of his lungs. After about 2 or 3 minutes of him being aggressive and doing this, I can assure you it felt like hours. He stopped, and I heard this weird metallic scraping sound, like metal on concrete, accompanied by a grunt, followed by a loud metallic clang. Silence. I waited for a while. I stealthily looked through windows and didn't see him. I opened the door, and to my surprise, saw that he had pulled my mailbox off the wall and thrown it onto the path leading to the sidewalk. I kicked myself for not filming the incident, but took my sweet time taking the perfect picture to show that he had made some kind of attempt to destroy the property. I mean, not that it can do much. It felt like the right thing to do nonetheless, and I still have it. I ended up putting the mop and bucket outside and telling Kareem to come get it, and that I just wanted him to leave me alone. I even took out the battery of our door code, since a part of me is paranoid that he'll try to guess it and break in. He came by and took it, and I watched him leave from the window. He hasn't contacted me since. I saw him on the street the other day, and he gave me a warm smile as if we were friends, but I looked away and crossed to the other side to avoid him. I filed a police report of the incident the same day, as advised by my landlord. She told me during our phone call that he had a documented history of aggression, and I am not shocked. I am surprised she gave me the benefit of the doubt though, and let him sign the lease in the first place. I guess this was a learning experience for all of us. When I asked her of her honest opinion of my new housemates, she said they were trustworthy. Plus, it turns out the guys and I have a mutual buddy, so I am not scared of them. I told them about the whole incident, and they blocked him on Facebook. They were super supportive and glad that I filed the report. They know who he is and won't let him inside. The thing that freaks me out a little is that he moved down the street. I can see his new unit from my window. This happened a few years ago when I was bartending in college. I was coming home down a stretch of divided highway at around 3 a.m. when I noticed a car heading towards me in the wrong lane. I doubted myself at first and thought the car was on the other side of the highway. Sure enough, the white Ford sedan passed me at a really high speed, at least 90 miles per hour. It's worth noting for later that I also drive a white Ford sedan. I was used to drunk, idiot drivers in the middle of the night, so I pulled to the side of the road and let him pass me. I had a moment of clarity and thought to call the police, thinking this person could hurt themselves or somebody else. The dispatcher answered, and after telling them which road and exit mile marker I was at, told me they would send a car. The state police station was only a few exits away, so I figured they would send somebody, and I would just drive home. As I headed back onto the highway, I noticed some lights a few miles behind me. I live in a more rural part of southeastern Pennsylvania, and traffic at 3 a.m. tends to be truckers and cops. The car gained on me as I was getting up to speed, so I stayed in the right lane and waited to be passed. Instead, they flipped on their high beams, making it uncomfortable to drive, and rode my tailgate. At this point, I thought I was going to be pulled over by the police. I drove a white Ford sedan and had just called about a different white Ford sedan, so I grabbed my registration from my glove box. Suddenly, the car behind me audibly slammed on the brakes and stopped in the middle of the highway. They must have shut off their car because the lights went out, and I saw what looked like the same Ford sedan from earlier. Still, I thought this may have been a police car. They had a roof rack, and it could have looked like I had reached for my gun in my glove box or something. I panicked and called 911 for the second time and asked the dispatcher if they had sent a cruiser to investigate. The dispatcher was a little curt with me and assured me that they would send somebody out. The dispatcher said, "We have sent a trooper out to find the car, sir." I responded, "I only asked because somebody is following me and acting weird. It could be a cop, and I think I freaked them out by getting my registration." The dispatcher then replied, "Are you pulled over, sir?" I responded, "No, they didn't turn on their lights." Dispatcher says, "Let me try to get the trooper we sent out." As she was talking, the car again sped towards me and stopped inches from my bumper. Again. Their high beams were on, and again they slammed their brakes. I told the dispatcher, "I'm pretty sure this is not the police behind me." The car sped to my bumper again and turned their high beams on, this time laying on the horn. Hearing this, the dispatcher asked me what was happening. "What's happening? Did you honk?" I responded, "That's the car behind me. I don't think it's a cop." Dispatcher replies, "I'll try to get the trooper again, but I don't think that's him behind you." For some reason, this is what shook me. Before that, I was thinking I would get pulled over and maybe get a ticket. Up until then, I was going the speed limit and trying to avoid getting pulled over. I told the dispatcher, "I don't care if I get pulled over. I'm speeding, and if they put their lights on, then I'll pull over." I started to accelerate, and the person behind me just kept up with me. The speed limit was 55, and they kept on my bumper the entire time, but this time, they were swerving. I tried to signal for an exit and bail on it, but they followed. At the next exit, I took the off-ramp and continued onto the on-ramp, and the car behind me followed the whole time. I thought about trying to go to a Wawa, a convenience store / gas station that's pretty much the only populated place in southeastern Pennsylvania at 3 a.m. But the dispatcher and I thought that it would be unsafe. She was calm and talking to another person trying to send police to me. The other person, maybe a supervisor, asked if I could drive to the state police station. Realizing that I was one exit away, I told her I was coming there, and that she would have the troopers meet me outside. As I pulled off the exit, The car followed me. I blew a few red lights trying to get to the police station, and the car tried to pull into the other lane to pass me or pull up alongside me. Once the police station was in view, I put on my turn signal and the car slammed on its brakes again, turning off their lights, and turned into the parking lot. The story ends kinda anticlimactically as I pulled into the police station and met the troopers. 2 of them went to find the car, and I stayed with the 3rd trooper. I thanked the dispatcher and her supervisor, and the state trooper escorted me home after taking a statement from me. I was never called to follow up or testify, so I can only assume this person was never caught. Who knows what they wanted with me that night? So this happened to me 2 years ago when I was 18. I need to set up the scenery of my house so that the location makes sense. I live in an upper middle class neighborhood that resides in the middle of a golf course. The course wraps around the intertwines of the neighborhood. I live in one of the most remote locations of this neighborhood, where we have no access to the main roadway. Furthermore, our house is a 2-story on about 1 acre. On the 1st floor is the kitchen, bedroom, office, and living room with a couple of bathrooms. The 2nd floor is just a couple of bedrooms along with bathrooms and a room we use for social gatherings. Along the back of the house, we also have a deck with metal and wicker furniture. Now that the setting is out of the way, it was on a rare Saturday that I had gotten off of work and I wanted the day to relax and not go anywhere or do anything. My parents knew I never really got days off, let alone a weekend off, so they were okay with letting me stay home alone when they went out of town for the day. They decided that day they were going out of town to shop at a nearby mall and wouldn't be home until late. Honestly, I don't remember where my brother was. It was a pretty normal day by itself. A lot of nothingness was accomplished until it got dark. I decided to come out of my room and watch TV in the living room since my new dog wasn't accustomed to stairs yet and would hardly walk up them. So sitting on the couch, I noticed my pup growling and the hair on the back of her neck standing up. For clarification, at this point, it's around 11 p.m. and I cannot see outside at all. I try to calm my dog down, but she's getting really hyper. I am getting anxious now too, because something is really upsetting her. So, I walk upstairs and pick up my BB gun I have in my room. I figure if someone is out there, I just have to stand inside with it and they'll think it's real. Well, after coming down with the BB gun, I take a step over the baby gate we have to keep our pup from peeing on the carpet, and I hear tapping. Someone or something is tapping on the glass window next to where I was sitting, and my dog had hidden behind my legs. I lifted the BB gun, acting like I was going to shoot, when I saw through the window a figure jump over and off the deck railing. I quickly called my parents. Yeah, I know, I should have called the police, but I wasn't thinking. Around midnight, they got home and turned on the deck lights. We instantly noticed that one of the metal chairs was pulled very far out of place and positioned to look inside the house where I was sitting before. We never did call the police about the incident, but when I was coming home from work about a week later, I pulled into the driveway around 10 p.m., where my headlights lit up a person hiding behind a tree. This was a full-grown adult wearing a long black coat in the middle of June. We did eventually call the police about that, but I have an inkling that it was the same guy. I was a high school student, living with my mother in a 3rd-floor apartment. I used to sleep in the living room because the apartment had only 1 bedroom, and it was my mom's. I was happy with that little space I had. I was a happy kid. I always got up at 6 a.m. to go to school, and my mom always got up at 5 a.m. to have time to shower and make breakfast before dropping me at school and heading to work. That morning, I woke up and the lights were all on. Every single one of them, even the one in my room. I went to grab my phone, and it wasn't there. Odd. I headed to the bathroom and saw all the drawers and doors of every furniture we had were open. I was deeply confused. My mom came out of the bathroom and asked me what the hell I had been doing. I told her I didn't know what she was talking about and that I thought she did that since she is always up to 1 hour earlier than me. I also asked if she had seen my cell phone. Then I saw it, deep inside her green eyes. The realization. I could see the fear and all the pieces inside her head clicking in place. She leaped to the kitchen and found the window wide open, a kitchen knife on the ground, and some dusty fingerprints on the wall where someone put weight on to climb inside. It was then when my sleepy head put the pieces together too. Someone, somehow, climbed all the way up to our balcony, got inside the apartment, and robbed us. All while I was asleep in my bed, right there in the living room. She hugged me and asked me if I was okay. I said I never heard anything. Didn't even wake up when this unknown person turned the lights on and rummaged through our stuff. It was super weird. I have the lightest sleep since I have memory, and I still do, many years later. They didn't dare to open my mom's bedroom door, so she didn't notice a thing. My grandma says that some angel protected me in my sleep, and that's why I didn't wake up. But I don't believe in that stuff. I don't think they knew I was there either. Police never found the robber, and we put steel bars on the window. We moved anyway, sometime after that. This happened when I was still in high school. At least 6 years have passed. My mother and I moved from that apartment, and now I am grown and living with my boyfriend. But to this day, I am still paranoid and keep thinking why I didn't wake up, though I am honestly grateful that I didn't. I moved to a mid to small Midwest American town with my boyfriend and 2 doggies last June for my doctoral internship year. It was an adjustment after living in a southern beach town, as well as a major city before that. Our living space is one of the factors that has made the move a positive experience. We are on one side of a twinplex, a 2-story home with a dividing wall that sits on 2 acres with some tree areas around it. Our landlord is a retired man in his 60s, kinda, and gets stuff done quick. There's a badass single mom and her kids, a huge Akita and a firearm on the other side of the twinplex. The kids are ages 17, 13, and 8 years old. The family is wonderful. This story isn't about them though. It's about the man next door. I got a weird vibe from him the first time I met him. Not a knee-jerk reaction or anything. Just a sort of question mark hovering above his head, like drawing a blank. In lieu of overt negative interactions, my boyfriend and I have been your typical level of neighborhood friendly. We give the wave here and there, and have no active grudge against him. Although my boyfriend doesn't have the same instinct about the man, he trusts mine. It's nothing I can point to, which as we all know, means nothing. I am thrown off by this man. It doesn't keep me up at night, and it's not something I ruminate on, but it's idling in the back of my mind every time I take the dogs in our large backyard, in view of his home. I have been thinking back to the very few interactions I've had with this man, which I can count on one hand. The first interaction we ever had was due to a dog fight. In fall 2019, a big male dog with no collar showed up on our property and approached my big dog. The dog wasn't displaying threatening posture, he was only curious. Unfortunately, my usually mushy-gush snuggle-bean boxer mix got attacked badly a few years ago by another dog, and he's got little doggy trauma now. Anytime he sees a male dog his size or larger, he gets hyper-vigilant. He misinterprets any wrong move as ready to attack, and attacks first. Think along the lines of a ready-at-any-moment PTSD response in a soldier, on the fight side of the fight or flight freeze appease reaction. So, Big Dog didn't take kindly to this unidentified dog fella. He responded like you would expect and went after him. I saw two men standing about 50 yards away, near the house in the yard next door. I assumed the uncollared dog belonged to one of them and called out for them to help break it up and retrieve their dog. The two men ran over and broke it up. Meanwhile, I'm standing there hitting the dogs with my dog's leash, trying to stop them, vicious snarls and all, which I am 100% sure was as dumb looking as it was ineffective. The other dog ran off. For your peace of mind, by the way, that little sweetie is just fine. He escaped unscathed, aside from puncture wounds on his neck that required no veterinary action. So there I was, sobbing, thanking both of the men for breaking it up. It turned out it wasn't their dog after all. The neighbor said he had seen the dog around before and believes that he tends to get out, and he thinks he knows where the dog lives. They were kind and reassured me that my dog was in the right, in protective mode, and the other dog running up on the property was easily interpreted as a threat to him. The conversation was without incident. I thanked them and brought Big Dog back inside. Another interaction we had was a few months later, when the neighbor was in his yard, an appropriate distance away, and I was taking out Big Dog and Small Dog. Small Dog is a perma puppy-sized beagle. Trouble with a capital T, but disgustingly sweet and cute. Big Dog is well trained and can be off-leash in appropriate areas. No problem. My neighbor said hello and made conversation about how he's never sure if he's able to pet my dog because he always barks at him from our window. I assured him Big Dog is extremely friendly, not to worry. I also made an irritating mental note that the neighbor inquired about Big Dog's threat level, and I told him he's zero threat at all. I don't know about you, but my automatic reaction is to calm situations, make others comfortable, etc., and I have got a very high tolerance for odd behaviors. Overlooking odd behaviors is detrimental in these kinds of situations. I think it was normal conversation to ask if your neighbor's dog is friendly, right? A learning moment for next time, I guess. Aside from this, there was one time when we briefly spoke about how deer come through our backyards, and he puts out food for them, and other critters and a few feeders. I see him in his backyard sometimes, doing what I assume is normal yard stuff, and critter feeding. I don't remember any other instances distinctly. This brings us to today. All morning and afternoon, I have been working on a scrapbooking project for my friend's 30th birthday, which is 7 months late. Thank you for the free time, COVID. The dogs are chilling by our sliding door that overlooks the back deck, large backyard, and the trees. My hot glue and I are minding our own business when all of a sudden, Big Dog starts growling and Small Dog started barking. Regular barks are usually squirrel or chipmunk alerts, but growls are for threats. I looked up and followed their gaze. There, in the trees on the border of our backyard, was my neighbor. He was barefoot and dressed in khaki shorts and a black shirt. He was fussing around near the ground in the middle of the tree line area that separates our expanses of unfenced yards. I figured he was refilling one of the feeders for the animals or something, but I kept watching because of the back of my head question mark on this guy. Then, he moved. He was already flirting with the property line where he was initially standing. He walked further, several paces into our property, in fuller view of our back deck and sliding door. I watched silently. Because I'm an anxious gal, I do double-check my alert reactions. For anyone who hasn't experienced anxiety, it's like having a jumpier needle than your average bear. To make sure I'm keeping my thought process relatively rational. I watched like this for a few seconds until he stopped moving. He halted on a patch of land a few paces beyond the property line, obscured by pine tree branches. All I could see was hips down. His knees were pointed at my window. While our yards are unfenced, there's an unspoken boundary neighbors don't cross here. It's a sloppy-looking star shape. There is a house at each point, and the expansive backyards are meld, converging into the center lawn. He had no business being in our area of the yard. There is nothing else to look at. It's our twinplex, and it's our side of the home, which begs the questions, Exactly what the hell are you doing, sir? Get your knees out of my trees. The best excuse I can come up with is that he was wistfully surveying his home and yard with the pride of a man who mows it himself. But that's a long shot. Doing anything resembling looking at his own home or yard would have required him to rotate his body more than 70 degrees to his left. I stood up in the middle of the room and approached the window so that he could see me looking out directly at him. Keeping him in my peripheral, I glanced around briefly to find my phone so I could take his picture, which I am happy for him to see me doing in broad daylight. I couldn't find it though, so I just watched. My body was stable, but I noticed my bones started shaking a little. I think I was having that behind-the-scenes brain acknowledgement that there was no other explanation for him to have been postured like that, facing toward me. After about 30 seconds, he casually walked back over to his side of the property and made what looked to me like a half-assed attempt to look like he was just picking a few things off of the ground, like you would do to clear a few pieces of litter. He paused in his yard, still obscured by the trees from the hips down. He was stationary. I walked to our bedroom to get a closer view out of our partially drawn blinds. In the 5 seconds it took to walk from the main room to our bedroom, he disappeared. I immediately called my boyfriend at work to let him know what's up. Even he agreed it was weird, and he's the polar opposite of dramatic versus understated. I walked out on my back deck in what would have been full view if he had still been outside, and knocked on my neighbor's sliding glass door overlooking the deck. I told her what I noticed, and we agreed. It was weird. She asked if Big or Small Dog reacted negatively to the neighbor, and I said no. She agreed it was weird, and we're both on the lookout now. We both went outside and blatantly stood where he was standing to get a look at the view. It was a clear shot to our window. I noticed it was dark inside my home, so even though I was standing in plain sight and staring at him, he likely wouldn't have seen it. I texted my landlord next, and he doesn't know the man at all. My landlord's mother-in-law lived in this space before us, and she hadn't mentioned anything. He was quick and responsive, and encouraged me to call our sheriff's office. I touched base with my boyfriend again, too. I asked him about Big Dog's reaction to the neighbor, just to be sure, and that's when I found out I was wrong. Apparently, my boyfriend noticed Big Dog growls at this neighbor, hair up, every time he sees him. No one else. Only him. As far as I'm concerned, 3 strikes, you're out, baby. My weird feeling, my dog repeatedly growling, and knees in my trees. I have my eyeballs trained straight on you. Don't try it again. Let me tell you a story about an idealistic, overly naive boy. In my senior year of college, I decided to study abroad, inspired by a now ex-friend who was going to information sessions during my Japanese language class. The cost was the same tuition-wise, and I got scholarships for the study to cover that entirely. I only paid for housing, food, and my ticket. It was the opportunity of a lifetime that turned into the trauma of a lifetime. Now, on my way to Japan, I was panicking in the car. I didn't think I could do it. It didn't help that my flight was very early and I had never flown alone, left the country, and hadn't lived alone since my sophomore year. My house was only 40 minutes away from campus, so I was never on my own really. We got to the airport and waved to my family and went through the bag check, only to hear my dad mumble, "He actually did it." Thanks, Dad. I surprised myself too. So off to Japan I fly, smiling and feeling free. I enjoyed my first 2 weeks, but things took a turn soon after. Now this is where my story branches off into 2 tales, the story for another time, and today's main course. Brief summary. My friend and I had a falling out before Japan. Somehow we ended up befriending the same people and hang out as a large group. This was fine for a while, but him being a gem led to me getting kicked out of that group. At this point, everyone had already formed cliques in our program, so I was alone. The treatment of that group and one clown made it hard for me to socialize due to gossip and people reading the air and judging me. I was alone in a foreign country, actively being shunned by the study abroad crowd, and gloriously all my anxiety came back with a vengeance. Now here's the thing, I really was struggling. I have been struggling with selective mutism. I had overcome it before, but a stressful situation brought it back. Now mix in a foreign language and I could barely speak at all. All things Japanese escaped my brain, so I was literally only able to say a few basics. Being alone made me decide to try online dating and meetup apps. I know, but I was desperate for someone to talk to, and I considered a study abroad romance romantic. I never really tried dating before because I wasn't interested in anyone seeing me as a man in a sexual way, being trans. But this was my chance to really mature, and I desperately wanted to make a few friends to explore with, to really make lasting bonds. All that BS they sell you at the study abroad fair. Here we go. Match number 1, cute guy. Claims he's in an acting troupe. He'll swing by if I want to mess around. I slow it down and we chat. He moves around because of the troupe and offers to pick me up. Thinks that I should join since study abroad sucks. I decline. Match number 2. Calls me baby right off the bat. A little forward, but I don't mind. I am awkward and have been accused of being forward, so I go with it. He keeps calling me baby. He rants about getting out of his long relationship. Asks me what I think of cheaters. Red flags, but I try to be open. I explain my views. He then asks me what I like, what movies and foods. Says he would like someone to stay home and cook for him. Okay, dude. Says that he considers cuddling and watching movies a good time. Likes to have deep conversations. Sounds great. I'm lonely, an open book, and hate bullcrap. His perfect date is mine as well. He calls me baby repeatedly, asks me tons of personal questions, but I get one-word responses to mine. I flip it back to him, ask the same questions, and he asks another deeply personal question instead of giving me an answer. Something feels off. This isn't normal. He swings from erratic anger about past relationships not working out, to heavy flirting to deeply personal quiz show questions, all within an hour of first contact. I'm in my room thinking, what the hell? Am I being pranked? I wasn't. I put the phone down and get in the shower. I come back to more messages. The last one angry that I'm taking so long to respond. I apologize and explain that I was in the shower. He gets madder, calls me a liar. I apologize. We keep chatting. Now as this is going on and alarm bells are ringing, I start thinking this guy is trying to get my info to impersonate me or something bad. Crazy, I know, but why else would this conversation be so one-sided? I am more talkative via text, but damn it, not that chatty. We are now on hour 3. My head is spinning as I get swept around by the barrage of messages, never really having time to think. I decide to tell him I think I've had enough. He apologizes and tells me a sob story. I bite and go in deeper. He tells me his ex kicked him out. I offer sympathy, and this guy starts saying words are better than actions, calls me baby again, and tells me I should run to a store and get him a damn gift card for PlayStation Network. Or something like that. It's been a year. It might have been a specific game, maybe Fortnite or one of those MMO games. I say I think this should be the end. He immediately replies, okay. No anger, no rant, just okay. Something about that was the creepiest part. It made me think this wasn't over. But honestly, I still thought I was being catfished by the assholes in my program. I mentioned it to someone I thought I could trust, and he told me there's no way. I'm being crazy. This guy sort of let me lean on him a little, but turns out to be two-faced. But that's part of story number 2, for another time. I turned to the one other person I'm still friendly with. We barely had spoken before, but she was sweet. I had tried to help her make friends after she was sick the first week. She ended up helping me in return later as things got worse for me. She and I are actually still in contact. She agreed that wasn't normal, and we walked to the 7-Eleven for some chicken and drinks that night. I get a message from an older man. He tells me he's married and straight and just looking to experiment. Says he has never done this before. Yeah, right, dude. He literally says every cliche, every come on, the works. It's like a bad rom-com. I should know since I love them. This guy talked like he was out of an episode of Will and Grace, so I'll call him Will, because honestly I don't remember his name. I told Will, 1, I am not interested in a sexual relationship. 2, I will not break up a marriage. And 3, I am not into older men. And Will was old, at least in his 50s. He had a blurry profile picture and sunglasses. No close-ups on the profile, but sent me a picture that could pass for the guy in the profile when I asked him to. He wasn't attractive to me at all, so I thought that it could be real. Otherwise, why send an average older man's picture? We talk a little, and I'm clearly not interested, but also don't want to be rude. But he keeps pressuring me to meet up and asking me questions. He likes that I'm a virgin. I'm starting to get freaked out and tell him he's making me a little uncomfortable. He apologizes and assures me he's never done this before. I roll my eyes and say sure. We talk some more, and he invites me to his hotel room so he can take my virginity, and I can be his first. I cringe. He then disappears as quickly as he came. Whole profile deleted. I think, that's weird. Conversations disappear with him. Apparently, that's how this app worked. The next day I get a message from Will. Sends the same picture of the guy without glasses. Starts asking me about sex again. Tried to talk dirty to me, and I say I'm not interested. He disappears again. Now this is where stuff gets creepier. We are on to day number 3 of this behavior. He tells me he's in the town I'm staying in still. Says that he's there one more night, and wants to pop my cherry. Hard pass, dude. No means no. And now I think of how persistent he's been. I thought about stories of being kidnapped or raped in hotel rooms, and how this dude does not accept no. I get an inappropriate picture while I'm thinking about what to do. I can't block him since he just pops up with another profile a day later. Life goes on, and I just accept this. Every day the old chat is gone, and a new one appears. I tell him no and block it. This goes on for a week, and I get fed up and tell him to get a clue. I block and report him, knowing it will do nothing. At this point, I don't leave my dorm for a few days, even for class. At this point, I had stopped caring. I had coordinated my schedule with my friends, and had to deal with at least 2 of them in every class. It made it hard to focus. The sweet girl checked on me, and took me to a cute cafe above the station. I started hanging out there alone, or with her. It just felt right, like exactly what I wanted. A place to chill away from those assholes at the dorm. A place just for me and my friend. Now, number 3, or is it? A few nights into this mess, I get a message from a new guy. We chat, and he seems cool, but the dude keeps trying to hook up with me. I guess the dating pool is slim if you only speak English, and he was super pent up. I explain I am not looking for sex, and he says it's cool, but keeps pushing. Lets me know he's actually going to be in my suburb of Tokyo. I say I can't meet up. I am actually in the main city with someone. He says cool. The next day I get the same message. This time I lie and say that I'm in the city again. He tells me that his friend lives by the station and he'll be there if I want to see him. Well, that's weird, because I live by the station. My dorm is right by the station. That is too convenient. Well, here we go again. I get a message. I check and it's from the same guy. He says he thinks he saw me at the cafe. I look around and see no one who's not Japanese. I look outside and see an older man pass and think nothing of it. I say that he should come say hi if he's there. No response. I ignore the message and leave for my other daily ritual, heading into the main area 2 stops over, looking at anime merch and Animate and Book Off, and visiting a local shrine. I had spent a lot of time at this shrine praying. I found it relaxing and quiet. I had been frequenting different shrines and performing rituals, making offerings, filling out prayer cards, and buying talismans, the works. I was looking for an answer to things in my life, about my mental health and loneliness, my struggles speaking, my ex-friend and the people shunning me. I was praying to decide should I stay or should I go, both about Japan and my life. Should I really transition? Should I go to grad school or get a job? Should I be a lawyer or work in entertainment? Really heavy stuff. Then all of a sudden, I feel this eerie sensation like I'm being watched. Now this shrine is quiet and I see nobody else. I decide to get out of there as fast as I can. All the way home I feel watched, but I'm being paranoid, right? It's in my head, right? No, it's not. I've seen that old white man before. He was outside the cafe. I start wondering if he was number 3. He was at the cafe when 3 messaged me, and there aren't a lot of white people in Japan. So who else could it be? Then a worse thought pops into my head. What if this is Will? I try to stay calm and walk to the train. This guy is still following me. I get on and he does too. Just as the doors are closing, I jump out. Will is at the other end of the cart and doesn't see in time. I wait for the next train and head home. Who do I see at my stop? You guessed it. Will. Now I've already made eye contact with him, so he knows I'm there. I remember something. There's a police box on the other side of the station. If I turn right instead of left, this guy will walk right by them. He couldn't possibly be gutsy enough to follow me after that. I run past Will and up the escalator. He slowly follows me all the way to the police box. Now my Japanese was bad and I could barely speak over there, but I had a head start and tried to explain the situation, but no words would come out at all. I was frozen there, trying to scream help, but nothing. Up walks Will. He casually grabs me by the arm, smiles at the officer, and says something in Japanese. He then looks down at me and tells me to be a good boy for Daddy. He pulls me away from the cops, and I am speechless, even more so than I already was. As he leads me away, I am shaking. This isn't going to end well for me. Tears fill my eyes, and he keeps leading me away. But suddenly there's my friend, walking down the street from the grocery store. I see a chance. I try to scream, but nothing comes out. By some miracle, she looks over at me anyway. She reads my face and shouts at him. He's startled. I bolt towards her. She charges at him, ready with pepper spray. He bolts. We both cry. I stuck with her even more after that. I eventually left because my anxiety was too bad. I'm still struggling with a lot, but I'm doing better. I'm on hormones, looking into grad school program, and I've tried to put the past behind me. But the anxiety is still there, and I have nightmares about trying to scream, but no words come out.